Have you ever stood before an ancient ruin or gazed at a weathered artifact in a museum and found yourself wondering what stories lie buried here? What truths have been lost to the silent passage of centuries? All around our world, there are whispers from the past that refuse to be silenced, riddles that have outlasted empires and defied the brightest minds of every generation. These are the ancient mysteries that archaeology still can't solve, enigmas that tantalize us with questions we may never fully answer, yet cannot stop pursuing. From cryptic structures built with impossible precision to vanished civilizations that left behind only fragments of their existence, these puzzles pull us into a timeless quest for understanding. They challenge not only what we think we know about human history, but also how we imagine our place in the grand tapestry of time. Whether it's the purpose of monumental sites whose original meaning has been erased by the ages, or artifacts that seem to defy the technological capabilities of their era, these mysteries remind us that the past is not a closed book, it's an unfolding story filled with gaps that beckon the curious. Today, we embark on a journey to uncover 30 of these profound puzzles, each one a testament to human ingenuity, wonder, and the enduring desire to solve the unsolvable. Together, we'll traverse continents and epochs, exploring questions that have stumped experts and captivated imaginations for centuries. So settle in and open your mind to the possibilities, because by the end of this exploration, you may find that history is far stranger and far more mysterious than you ever imagined. And we begin with perhaps the most famous ancient wonder and enduring enigma on the planet, the Great Pyramids of Giza. For thousands of years, these majestic structures have dominated the Egyptian desert, a silent and imposing testament to a civilization's incredible ambition. Yet for all their grandeur, the pyramids guard their deepest secrets closely. The fundamental question remains, how were they actually built? We're talking about moving and precisely positioning an estimated 2.3 million massive limestone blocks, each one weighing several tons. The scale is almost unimaginable even with our modern machinery, yet the ancient Egyptians accomplished this colossal feat over 4,500 years ago. The most widely accepted theory suggests a system of ramps, but this explanation immediately raises more questions than it answers. What kind of ramp could have been built to reach the increasing height of the pyramid without being impossibly long, requiring more material than the pyramid itself? Was it a single straight ramp, a zigzagging one, or an internal ramp spiraling up within the structure? Each concept has its proponents, but each also faces serious logistical challenges that leave room for doubt. This leads to other, more speculative ideas. Some researchers have proposed that the Egyptians might have used water channels to help float the heavier blocks into place, leveraging the Nile's annual flood. Others point to the potential use of sound or vibrational technology, a concept that, while fascinating, lacks any concrete evidence from the archaeological record. And of course, this mystery has fueled endless speculation about lost advanced technologies or even extraterrestrial assistance, though mainstream archaeology finds no support for such claims. What makes the pyramids even more baffling is their astonishing precision. The Great Pyramid's sides are aligned almost perfectly with the four cardinal directions north, south, east, and west, with a margin of error that is astonishingly tiny. Its base is nearly a perfect square. This isn't just rough stonework, it's a project of incredible mathematical and astronomical sophistication, suggesting the builders possessed a deep understanding of the Earth's dimensions and the movements of the stars. So, while we can make educated guesses, the true methods remain locked in the past. The construction of the Great Pyramid is a masterpiece of engineering that stands as a humbling reminder that our ancestors achieved wonders that we still struggle to comprehend. Leaving the sands of Egypt behind, our journey takes us to the windswept Salisbury Plain in England, home to one of the world's most iconic and enigmatic monuments, Stonehenge. This haunting circle of towering stones has stood for over 4,500 years, a silent sentinel whose original purpose has been the subject of fierce debate for generations. Unlike the pyramids, whose function as tombs is at least partially understood, Stonehenge offers no such easy answers, presenting us with a blank slate upon which countless theories have been projected. One of the most compelling and widely supported ideas is that Stonehenge served as a sophisticated astronomical observatory. The arrangement of the stones aligns with breathtaking precision to the movements of the sun and moon. During the summer solstice, the rising sun perfectly intersects the heel stone, casting its rays directly into the heart of the circle. This alignment is far too precise to be mere coincidence, strongly suggesting that its builders possessed a deep, nuanced knowledge of celestial patterns. It may have functioned as a massive calendar, marking the changing seasons and dictating the rhythms of agricultural life and ceremonial cycles for the Neolithic people who built it. Yet, an astronomical purpose doesn't preclude a spiritual one. Many experts argue that it was primarily a sacred religious site, perhaps a temple dedicated to ancient deities of the sun and earth. The effort required to construct it points to a place of immense communal importance, likely the focal point for seasonal gatherings, rituals, and rites of passage. The cremated human remains found on the site also suggest a powerful funerary function, a place to honor and connect with ancestors, blurring the line between the physical and the spiritual worlds. Adding another fascinating layer to the mystery is the more recent theory that Stonehenge was a renowned center of healing. The presence of a large number of human remains showing signs of severe injury and illness, combined with the incredible journey undertaken to bring its stones from far away, supports the idea that people may have traveled great distances believing in the monument's curative powers. The specific type of stone used for the smaller inner circle, known as blue stones, is central to this theory. These stones were transported an astonishing 150 miles from the Preseli Hills in Wales. The question of how Neolithic people achieved this feat is a mystery in itself. Did they move these multi-ton slabs overland using a system of rollers and sledges across rivers and rugged terrain? Or did they partially transport them by sea, navigating the treacherous Welsh coastline and inland waterways on rafts? The sheer exertion of will and organization required for this task speaks volumes about the significance these stones held. Their choice wasn't arbitrary. Something about the blue stones, perhaps their perceived magical properties, their unique acoustic ring when struck, or their geological composition, made them indispensable to the builder's vision. Ultimately, Stonehenge likely served not one, but all of these purposes across its long history. It was a calendar that tracked the heavens, a cathedral where communities worshipped, and possibly a hospital where the sick sought solace. Its true meaning is as layered as the civilization that built it, a multifaceted symbol whose complete story we are still piecing together today. While the stone circles of Europe capture our imagination, another kind of mystery lies waiting in the forests of the New World, a puzzle born not from ancient megaliths, but from the sudden, chilling silence of a vanished community. This is the story of the lost colony of Roanoke, a tale that begins with hope and ambition and ends with a single, cryptic word. In 1587, a group of approximately 115 English settlers, including women and children, established a colony on Roanoke Island, off the coast of what is now North Carolina. Their governor, John White, soon sailed back to England for crucial supplies, his departure delayed by the outbreak of war with Spain. When he finally managed to return 3 years later in 1590, he found the settlement utterly deserted. The houses had been carefully dismantled, not destroyed in an attack, and there were no signs of a struggle or mass grave. The only clue was a single word carved into a wooden post, Croatoan. On a nearby tree, the letters Crow were found, seemingly carved in haste. This was not a message of distress, it was a planned notation, left behind by people who seemingly knew where they were going. The most plausible theory, and the one Governor White himself believed, was that the colonists had relocated to live with the Croatoan people, a friendly Native American tribe who inhabited a nearby island now known as Hatteras. The carving was likely intended to tell White exactly where they had gone. A severe drought and poor relations with other, more hostile tribes would have made survival on Roanoke Island nearly impossible, making integration with allies a logical choice for survival. For centuries, this has been the leading explanation, supported by later reports from English explorers of encounters with native people who had grey eyes, spoke English, and claimed descent from white settlers. Yet, the mystery endures because archaeology has frustratingly failed to deliver a definitive answer. Extensive digs on Hatteras Island have uncovered some tantalizing European artifacts from the correct time period: a rapier hilt, a slate writing tablet, and a gold signet ring. But these are objects of trade and contact, not the undeniable evidence of an assimilated community, like the remains of English-style housing, a fort, or a cemetery. The lack of such a smoking gun keeps the door open for other, more tragic theories. Perhaps the colony was wiped out by disease or an attack from a hostile tribe, and the Croatoan carving was a red herring or a desperate plea for help that never came. Another compelling idea suggests the colonists may have tried to sail back to England on their own in a small ship and were lost at sea. The enduring power of the Roanoke story lies in that single word. Croatoan is a promise of an answer that remains just out of reach, a testament to the fragile line between survival and oblivion in the early days of European settlement in America. It is a mystery that lives on not in stone, but in the echoes of what might have been. Moving from the dense forests of the Americas to the arid plains of Peru, we encounter a mystery of an entirely different scale, one so vast it can only be truly appreciated from the heavens. Etched into the stark, rocky surface of the Nazca Desert are hundreds of enormous geoglyphs, known collectively as the Nazca Lines, created by removing the dark, sun-baked top layer of pebbles to reveal the lighter-colored sand beneath. These immense figures have endured for over 2,000 years, preserved by one of the driest climates on Earth. They depict a stunning array of subjects: a hummingbird with wings outstretched, a spider with perfectly articulated legs, a monkey with a curiously spiraled tail, and geometric shapes that stretch for miles in the form of precise triangles, trapezoids, and spirals. The sheer size of these creations is staggering. Some figures are over 1,200 feet long, larger than multiple football fields. This immediately presents us with the central paradox of the Nazca Lines. Why would a people who could never have seen their work from above create art that is only fully visible from the air? This question has fueled decades of speculation and debate. One of the earliest and most persistent theories is that the lines served a vital astronomical or calendrical purpose. Proposed by researcher Maria Reich, who dedicated her life to studying the geoglyphs, this idea suggests the lines acted as a gigantic observatory, with certain shapes and lines aligning with the sun, moon, and significant stars during solstices or other celestial events. They could have functioned as a sophisticated agricultural calendar, signaling the optimal times for planting and harvesting to the Nazca people. However, while some alignments do exist, later, more rigorous statistical analyses have shown that just as many lines point to random places in the sky, weakening the idea that astronomy was their sole or even primary function. This leads to the compelling argument for a deeply religious or ritualistic purpose. Many archaeologists believe the lines were sacred pathways, walked by priests or pilgrims during ceremonies, possibly to plead with the gods for water in an incredibly parched landscape. The depictions of animals, many of which are associated with water in Andean cosmology, like the hummingbird, a creature of rain and fertility, support this theory. The shapes may have been offerings to deities designed to be seen not by humans, but by the gods themselves from their celestial realm. The act of creating the lines, a massive communal effort requiring precise coordination, would have itself been a powerful ritual, strengthening social bonds and reinforcing a shared belief system. Of course, the most famous and sensational theory is the one proposed by Erich von Däniken in the 1960s, that the long, straight lines were ancient runways for extraterrestrial spacecraft. While this idea captured the public imagination and remains a staple of popular culture, it is overwhelmingly dismissed by mainstream scholars. It not only ignores the cultural context of the Nazca people, but also undermines their demonstrated ingenuity. We know the Nazca were capable of remarkable feats of engineering. They developed sophisticated underground aqueducts known as puquios to bring water to their settlements. Creating the lines, while logistically impressive, was well within their capabilities. Researchers have demonstrated that with simple tools, wooden stakes, and careful planning, a team could accurately reproduce these large-scale designs. The real mystery isn't how they did it, but why they invested so much effort into creating something they could never see in its entirety. Perhaps the most satisfying explanation is that the answer is not a single one. The Nazca Lines likely served multiple interconnected purposes across centuries. They were a ritual space, an astronomical tool, and a profound expression of cultural identity. A permanent inscription of their world, you onto the very skin of the earth, a message to their gods that has, by chance, endured to mystify us. While the Nazca Lines present a massive, landscape-sized puzzle visible from the sky, our next mystery is one of incredible intimacy, a riddle contained within the delicate pages of a single tiny book. Tucked away in the Voynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Yale University is an object that has defied understanding for centuries, the Voynich Manuscript. This is not a grand monument of stone, but a fragile codex, a book measuring just 9 by 6 inches, filled from edge to edge with secrets. Its estimated 240 vellum pages are covered in an elegant yet utterly unknown script, flowing from left to right in a language that resembles nothing else on Earth. It is profusely illustrated with paintings of plants that do not exist, women bathing in bizarre green tubs connected by intricate plumbing, and intricate astrological charts depicting unknown constellations. The manuscript is generally believed to have been created in northern Italy during the early 15th century, based on the style of its illustrations and carbon dating of the vellum. Its known history begins in the 17th century when it was purchased by an alchemist named Georg Bersch, who was already baffled by its contents. It eventually found its way into the hands of Wilfrid Voynich, a Polish book dealer who acquired it in 1912 and brought it to widespread public attention, lending it his name and its enduring fame. Since then, it has passed through numerous owners, each hoping to crack its code before finding its permanent home at Yale. The book is organized into distinct sections, each adding a new layer to the mystery. The largest portion is the herbal section, filled with drawings of unidentifiable plants flora with strange, overlapping roots, leaves that seem to fuse together, and blossoms that belong to no known genus. Then there are the astronomical and biological sections, which feature circular diagrams of suns, moons, and stars alongside countless nude female figures, often immersed in or connected by what appears to be a network of green, watery channels. Another section is dedicated to what look like pharmaceutical recipes, showing drawn jars and containers next to fragments of text, suggesting it might have been a manual for creating remedies. Finally, there are pages filled with what can only be described as complex fold-out charts, resembling a fantastical map of a non-existent island or a schematic for some alchemical process. This has led to a multitude of theories about its purpose. Was it a medieval medical textbook compiling knowledge of herbal remedies from a now-lost tradition? Could it be a treatise on alchemy, with its strange diagrams encoding the steps to create the philosopher's stone? The bathing women have sparked theories about a forgotten sex manual or a guide to spiritual balneotherapy. The sheer coherence of the text, it follows distinct statistical patterns found in natural languages, with word repetition and sentence structure that feels purposeful, strongly suggests it is not random gibberish. It behaves like a real language, just one we cannot read. This linguistic mystery has attracted the world's top codebreakers, including teams from the National Security Agency and brilliant cryptanalysts who successfully cracked Japanese and Nazi codes during the Second World War. They applied every tool in their arsenal: frequency analysis, pattern recognition, sophisticated computer algorithms, and all have walked away completely stumped. The script resists every known method of decryption. This repeated failure has led some to argue that the manuscript is an incredibly elaborate and expensive hoax, perhaps created to deceive a wealthy Renaissance patron. A clever forger could have invented a plausible-looking script and filled the pages with nonsensical but aesthetically pleasing drawings. Yet the time, cost, and skill required to produce such a detailed book on valuable vellum make a simple hoax seem strangely impractical. Why go to such extravagant lengths for a prank? Perhaps the most tantalizing possibility is that it represents a rare example of a constructed language, or perhaps a written form of a vernacular that was never recorded elsewhere, its meaning lost when its culture disappeared. The Voynich Manuscript stands as the ultimate locked room mystery of the literary world. It is a siren's call to the curious, a tangible object that you could hold in your hands, yet its secrets remain perfectly and perpetually out of reach. But if the Voynich Manuscript represents a mystery of unknowable intention, our next enigma is a stunningly clear window into a technological sophistication we never knew existed. Imagine a lump of corroded bronze and wood, encrusted with centuries of sea life, pulled from the depths of the Mediterranean Sea near the island of Antikythera. Discovered by sponge divers in 1900 and won amid the treasures of a Roman-era shipwreck, it was initially set aside as just another artifact. It wasn't for another 50 years that archaeologists examining the fragmented rocks noticed something extraordinary. Embedded within were precise gear wheels, finely inscribed dials, and a complexity that seemed to belong not to antiquity but to the 18th century. This object, now known as the Antikythera Mechanism, has been called the world's first analog computer, and it completely upends our understanding of ancient Greek science and engineering. Dating back to around 100 BC, this device was housed in a wooden box roughly the size of a large shoebox. On its front was a large circular dial with pointers showing the positions of the sun, moon, and possibly the 5 known planets against the backdrop of the Egyptian zodiac. By simply turning a hand crank on the side, the user could set the mechanism in motion, its dozens of interlocking bronze gears calculating and displaying celestial information with astonishing accuracy. It could predict solar and lunar eclipses, track the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games, and even model the irregular orbit of the moon, accounting for its slight wobble in the sky, a subtlety of astronomy that we thought was only understood over 1,000 years later. The sheer genius of its design is what leaves researchers in awe. It utilizes a differential gear, a complex arrangement previously believed to have been invented in the 16th century for modern automobiles. This wasn't just a simple clockwork, it was a physical manifestation of highly advanced astronomical theories, a miniature planetarium powered by a hand crank. The knowledge required to create it implies a centuries-long tradition of mechanical engineering and precise astronomical observation that was simply lost to history. We have no other devices like it from the ancient world. Its existence suggests it was not unique, but rather a pinnacle achievement of a school of craftsmanship that has otherwise vanished without a trace. This leads to the profound and haunting question, who made it and what happened to their knowledge? The leading theory points to the island of Rhodes and the legendary workshop of the astronomer Posidonius, or perhaps even the great inventor Archimedes himself, who is said to have constructed a similar planetarium. The Antikythera shipwreck was on a route from Rhodes to Rome, possibly carrying plundered Greek treasures to grace a Roman general's triumphal parade. Was this mechanism, this crown jewel of Hellenistic science, destined for the villa of a wealthy Roman patron? And if so, how many other incredible devices were lost when that knowledge died with the fall of the classical world? The Antikythera Mechanism forces us to reconsider the technological ceiling of the ancient world. It stands as a silent, corroded testament to a path not taken, a brilliant flash of mechanical genius that flickered out for over a millennium. It is a humbling reminder that history is not a simple story of linear progress, but a landscape dotted with peaks of achievement that can be forgotten, waiting on the ocean floor to be rediscovered and to challenge everything we thought we knew. From the intricate gears of a recovered ancient computer, we now turn our attention to a legend born from words alone, a story of a magnificent civilization that, according to the tale, vanished beneath the waves in a single day and night of catastrophic misfortune. This is the enduring enigma of Atlantis, a name that has become synonymous with the dream of a lost golden age and the hubris of a people punished by the gods. The entire story of this fabled island nation originates from the works of the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who described it in his dialogues the Timaeus and the Critias, written around 360 BCE. He presents it not as a myth, but as a historical account passed down to him from his ancestors, a true story about a powerful naval empire that existed 9,000 years before his own time. Located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, Atlantis was described as a circular complex of alternating rings of land and water, with a splendid royal palace at its heart. Its people grew arrogant from their immense power and wealth, launching an unprovoked attack on the prehistoric Athens. The proud Atlanteans were defeated by the virtuous Athenians, and shortly thereafter, the entire island was shattered by violent earthquakes and floods, sinking into the sea forever. This is where the great debate begins. Did Plato invent Atlantis as a fictional allegory to illustrate his philosophical points about the ideal state and the dangers of imperial overreach? Or was he recording a genuine, albeit embellished, tradition of a real cataclysm? The sheer specificity of Plato's account, its geography, its timeline, its political structure, has fueled 24 centuries of searching. Countless theories have been proposed, each attempting to pin this legendary lost city to a real-world location. One of the most compelling candidates is the island of Santorini in the Aegean Sea. Known in ancient times as Thera, it was the site of one of the largest volcanic eruptions in human history around 1600 BCE. The eruption utterly devastated the sophisticated Minoan civilization centered on nearby Crete, with massive tsunamis and ash fall leading to a sudden and dramatic collapse. The geological formation of Santorini, with its central caldera surrounded by a ring of islands, bears a striking resemblance to Plato's description of Atlantis's concentric circles. The timeline is off by thousands of years, but proponents suggest the story could have been distorted as it was passed down through generations. Other theories place Atlantis much closer to its stated location near Gibraltar. Some researchers point to the Doñana National Park in southern Spain, where satellite imagery and core samples have suggested the possible remnants of a sunken city. Here, a civilization known as Tartessos flourished and then mysteriously disappeared around the 6th century BCE, potentially providing a historical kernel for Plato's tale. Further afield, the rich and complex culture of the Minoans themselves on Crete is often cited, with their magnificent palace complexes like Knossos and their sudden decline potentially forming the basis for the Atlantis legend. Others have looked to the Caribbean, suggesting the Bahamas and even the Azores as possible sites, though these often rely more on imaginative speculation than archaeological or geological evidence. The search for Atlantis has also spawned its fair share of more fringe ideas, From claims that it was an advanced civilization possessing futuristic technology to suggestions that it was located in Antarctica. These theories, while captivating, typically lack any credible evidence and often require a complete rewriting of known Earth history and geology. The mainstream archaeological view remains deeply skeptical. For most scholars, Atlantis is a powerful philosophical myth, a brilliant piece of political storytelling crafted by one of history's greatest minds. They argue that no other ancient source mentions Atlantis independently of Plato, and no definitive archaeological evidence has ever been found on the ocean floor to confirm a sunken continent-sized landmass in the Atlantic. Yet the legend persists with undiminished power. Why does Atlantis continue to captivate us? Perhaps because it speaks to a deep, universal human anxiety about the fragility of our own civilizations. We see in its story a warning about environmental catastrophe, about the pride that comes before a fall, and about the terrifying speed with which even the most advanced society can be erased from the Earth. Atlantis is more than a place, it is an idea. It represents our fascination with what might lie hidden beneath the waves, a symbol of paradise lost that drives explorers to keep looking, ensuring that the search for this sunken kingdom is itself a story that will never be forgotten. Leaving the sunken dreams of Atlantis behind, we now journey to one of the most remote inhabited places on Earth, a tiny volcanic island in the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. Here we find a mystery standing in silent, stoic rows, gazing with hollow eyes across the landscape. These are the Moai of Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, and they represent one of archaeology's most captivating and cautionary tales. Carved from compressed volcanic ash by the Rapa Nui people between the 13th and 16th centuries, these monolithic human figures are awe-inspiring in their scale and number. Nearly 900 of them dot the island, with the average statue standing 13 feet tall and weighing a staggering 14 tons. The largest of them all, named El Gigante, was left unfinished in its quarry. If completed, it would have soared to a height of 70 feet and weighed an almost inconceivable 270 tons. The central question that has baffled experts for generations is as simple as it is profound. How did a people with only Stone Age technology move these colossal figures miles across rugged terrain from the central quarry to their final ceremonial platforms known as Ahu? For a long time, the prevailing theory involved a Herculean effort of log rolling and sledges. This idea suggested the Rapa Nui used a vast network of wooden sleds and rollers, pulling the statues with ropes over a carpet of felled trees. This theory, however, became entangled with the island's own tragic history of ecological collapse. The popular narrative told of a society that grew so obsessed with erecting these monuments that they cut down every last palm tree on the island to facilitate the transport. This act of deforestation led to catastrophic soil erosion, the collapse of agriculture, and a devastating societal descent into warfare, famine, and cannibalism. It was a powerful parable about environmental hubris, but modern archaeology is now rewriting this story. A revolutionary and now widely accepted theory emerged from an experiment that was as elegant as it was simple. Researchers Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo proposed that the statues didn't need to be dragged horizontally at all. Instead, they could have been walked upright to their destinations. By attaching 3 ropes to a precise replica moai, one on each side and one pulling from the front, a surprisingly small team of just 18 people could rock the statue from side to side, edging it forward with each tilt in a process that would have made the giant stone figure appear to walk gracefully across the land. This method not only proved to be highly efficient but also left distinctive wear patterns on the roads corresponding to the bases of the actual moai found along the ancient transport path. This walking theory suggests the process was a coordinated, rhythmic, and even ceremonial act of communal effort, far removed from the image of desperate, tree-destroying laborers. But the how is only half the mystery. the why is equally compelling. The Moai were not solitary sentinels. They were integrated parts of a sophisticated spiritual and social system. They were not gods, but representations of deified ancestors. Each statue was commissioned by a clan or family group and erected on a coastal Ahu platform, which also served as a tomb for the community's dead. The belief was that these powerful ancestors, once placed on their platform with their backs to the sea, could use their mana or spiritual energy to watch over and protect the living, ensuring fertility and prosperity. The final and most sacred act of their creation was the placing of coral and obsidian eyes into their sockets, a ceremony that was believed to fully activate the statue's spiritual power. The island's eventual societal decline likely had less to do with a sudden mad rush of statue building and more with the arrival of European diseases, slave raiding, and the introduction of rats that decimated the native flora. The true story of Rapa Nui is not one of foolish ecocide, but of a resilient and ingenious people who achieved a remarkable cultural feat, and whose descendants are still there today, working to preserve and understand their incredible heritage. The Moai stand as a testament to human ingenuity and the complex, often misunderstood, relationship between a culture and its environment. While we often think of electricity as a modern discovery, what if the ancient world had grasped its basic principles thousands of years before we ever plugged in an appliance? This tantalizing possibility lies at the heart of our next mystery, a simple yet profoundly puzzling artifact unearthed in the 1930s just outside Baghdad, Iraq. Dating back to the Parthian period, around 200 BC to 200 CE, this object is now famously known as the Baghdad Battery. It consists of a rather unassuming 5-inch-long clay jar, inside of which sits a rolled copper sheet cylinder, sealed at the bottom with bitumen. Suspended in the center of this copper tube is an iron rod, also held firmly in place by an asphalt plug. To the untrained eye, it looks like a sealed vessel for storing a precious liquid, perhaps a sacred scroll. But to anyone familiar with basic chemistry, its construction is strikingly familiar. It contains all the fundamental components of a simple galvanic cell, 2 dissimilar metals, copper and iron, and an acidic electrolyte which would have been provided by a liquid like vinegar or wine to create a chemical reaction and generate a small electrical charge. The discovery sparked an electrifying theory. When filled with an acidic solution, this ancient jar could have produced a low-level voltage, somewhere around 1 volt of electricity. This may not sound like much, it's less power than a standard A battery, but it could have been enough for specific, subtle applications. The most compelling proposed use is for electroplating, the process of using an electric current to bind a thin layer of a precious metal, like gold, onto the surface of a less valuable object such as silver. We know the Parthians and later Sasanians were master artisans, creating beautifully gilded objects. While they had other chemical methods for gilding, a low electrical current could have provided a more controlled and efficient result. Other theories suggest a medical purpose. The ancient Greeks and Egyptians were known to use electric fish to deliver shocks for pain relief. So a device that could generate a consistent, low-level tingle might have been used in early forms of electrotherapy. Or perhaps it held a more religious significance, creating a mysterious but palpable energy that could awe worshippers in a temple when they touched connected metal objects. However, the battery theory is far from settled fact, and many respected archaeologists offer a much more mundane explanation. The primary counter-argument is that the object was simply a secure storage container for important scrolls. The iron rod would have been a convenient axle around which to roll a piece of parchment, which was then sealed inside the protective copper cylinder and the outer clay jar to keep it safe from humidity and pests. The bitumen plug would have made the vessel airtight, preserving its contents perfectly. This interpretation is supported by the discovery of very similar jars from the same period that were indeed used for scroll storage and lacked the metal components. Proponents of this view point out that no wires or connectors have ever been found with these jars, and no ancient texts from the region make any mention of electrical phenomena or its applications. If this knowledge was widespread enough to manufacture such devices, why is there a complete absence of any written record or artistic depiction of their use? This leaves us at an intriguing impasse. The scroll storage theory is practical and fits with known archaeological evidence, but it doesn't fully explain why someone would go to the trouble of using two different and valuable metals in a sealed environment where a simple clay or wood stopper would suffice. The battery theory is revolutionary and captures our imagination, suggesting a spark of lost knowledge, but it lacks the corroborating evidence to move from a fascinating "what if" to a confirmed "what was." The truth is, we may never know for certain. The original artifacts were looted from the National Museum of Iraq during the 2003 invasion, and their current whereabouts are unknown, making further direct study impossible for now. The Baghdad Battery therefore stands as a powerful symbol of the limits of our understanding. It represents the constant tension in archaeology between the practical and the magical, between the simple, everyday object and the world-altering invention it might have been. It challenges us to wonder how many other breakthroughs we might have missed, simply because we weren't looking for them in the artifacts of the past. Far to the north of the sophisticated Greeks and Romans, on the rugged coast of Brittany in northwestern France, lies a mystery of a different kind. It is not a single artifact or a legendary tale, but a vast, sprawling landscape of stone that defies simple explanation. This is the site of Karnak, where over 3,000 megaliths prehistoric standing stones are arranged in dense, parallel rows that stretch for miles across the countryside. Unlike the organized circles of Stonehenge, the stones of Karnak form what are known as alignments, with the largest groupings named Lamanic, Kamario, and Kaleskan. Walking among them is an experience unlike any other. It is a labyrinth of granite, a silent army frozen in time, their original purpose lost to the ages. Dating back to around 4,500 BCE, during the Middle Neolithic period, the construction of this site represents a communal effort of almost unimaginable scale and duration. We are talking about a project that spanned centuries, with generations of people dedicating their lives to quarrying, transporting, and erecting these massive stones, some of which weigh several tons. The sheer logistics are mind-boggling. How did they move them? Where did they quarry the stone? And most importantly, why did they commit such a vast amount of labor and resources to this single, staggering endeavor? The most prominent theory, and one that connects Karnak to other megalithic sites across Europe, is that it functioned as a gigantic astronomical observatory. The precise alignments of the stones seem to correspond with major solar and lunar events. Certain rows point directly to the sunrise at the solstices and equinoxes, while others may have been used to track the complex cycles of the moon. In this view, Karnak was a celestial calendar carved into the earth, a way for an early agricultural society to mark the passing seasons, predict weather patterns, and organize their ritual life around the dependable rhythms of the cosmos. It would have been a place of immense practical and spiritual importance, where the priesthood could demonstrate their connection to the heavens and guide their people. Yet, an astronomical function doesn't preclude a deeper religious significance. Many archaeologists believe the alignments formed a sacred processional pathway, a ritual landscape designed for ceremonies we can only dimly perceive. Imagine communities gathering here for seasonal festivals, funerary rites, or initiations, walking the pathways between the stones in a symbolic journey from one realm to another. The nearby giant burial mounds or tumuli and the elaborate dolmen's stone table tombs support this idea, painting a picture of a culture deeply concerned with venerating ancestors and mediating between the world of the living and the world of the dead. The stones themselves, often seen as abodes for spirits or representations of ancestors, would have made this entire area a potent, holy place. A more recent and pragmatic theory suggests the stones served as territorial markers for early farming communities. As societies became more settled and populations grew, defining clan lands and establishing borders would have become increasingly important. The immense effort required to erect such permanent monuments would have sent a clear, unchallengeable message: this land is ours. The alignments might not point to the stars, but to sources of water, fertile valleys, or the territories of rival groups. In this sense, the stones were a declaration of identity and ownership, a project that also would have strengthened social cohesion within the group through a shared monumental task. Local folklore offers its own enchanting, if unscientific, explanations. The most popular legend tells of the Roman legions pursuing the Christian Saint Cornelius, who was also the Pope at the time. Finding himself and his followers cornered on the Breton coast, Saint Cornelius turned around and transformed the entire army into stone with a single gesture, freezing them in their tracks for all eternity. The neat, orderly rows, the legend says, are the petrified remains of those soldiers. While a charming story, it highlights the fundamental truth that for thousands of years, people have looked upon these stones and felt compelled to create a story for them, to fill the silence with meaning. The true answer is likely a complex fusion of all these ideas. Karnak was probably not built for one reason, but for many reasons that evolved over its long history. It was an astronomical tool, a religious sanctuary, and a social statement all at once. The absence of any written records from its builders means we are left to interpret their intentions through the silent, imposing language of stone. They left no manuals, only monuments, a breathtaking, cryptic poem written across the landscape, inviting us to wander its lines and wonder what profound beliefs could have moved people to create something so enduring and so mystifying. While the Dead Sea Scrolls are renowned for their profound religious and historical significance, containing some of the oldest known biblical manuscripts, one scroll stands completely apart, not for its spiritual revelations, but for its material and its tantalizing worldly promise. This is the Copper Scroll, and it is perhaps the most bizarre and alluring outlier in the entire collection. Discovered in 1952 in a cave near Qumran, it wasn't written on leather or papyrus like its companions. As its name declares, it was inscribed on thin sheets of copper, a costly and durable metal that would have been exceptionally difficult to work with. Why go to such extraordinary effort? The answer seems clear. The author wasn't recording scripture for the ages. They were creating a permanent, corrosion-resistant record of something meant to be found and used later, a treasure map. When scholars finally managed to carefully cut open the brittle, oxidized scroll in 1956, they revealed a list written in a form of Hebrew distinct from the other scrolls. It isn't a philosophical treatise or a religious law. It's a meticulous, matter-of-fact inventory of 64 locations where staggering quantities of treasure are allegedly hidden. The list is breathtaking in its specificity and scale. It describes vast hoards of gold and silver, along with precious utensils and incense, often quantified in precise weights of talents. To put this in perspective, the scroll mentions thousands of talents of precious metals. A single talent was a massive unit of weight, roughly equivalent to 75 pounds. The quantities described are so enormous, amounting to tons of gold and silver, that they would represent a significant portion of the entire ancient world's wealth, dwarfing the treasuries of kings and empires. This immediately presents the central, burning question: whose treasure could this possibly have been, and was it ever real? The most prominent theory suggests it was the vast accumulated wealth of the Second Jewish Temple in Jerusalem. Historical accounts, most notably from the Roman historian Josephus, describe the incredible riches stored within the temple before it was sacked by Roman legions under Titus in 70 CE. The theory posits that as the Roman army advanced, Jewish priests or rebels managed to spirit away the temple's sacred treasures to hide them throughout the Judean desert, recording the locations on this copper scroll to ensure their recovery after the conflict had passed. The cryptic nature of the directions, which often reference landmarks like ruins, dams, and specific tombs, would have made perfect sense to those who hid it but are nearly indecipherable to anyone else. This would explain the need for secrecy and the use of a durable metal to survive until the time was right. Yet, the sheer volume of treasure listed is a major point of contention. Many historians argue that the amounts are so fantastically exaggerated that they cannot be literally true. This has led to an alternative interpretation that the treasure was not physical but symbolic. Perhaps the gold and silver described represent spiritual riches or sacred texts that were hidden for safekeeping. In this view, the copper scroll is an allegorical text, its treasure being the wisdom and tradition of a community under threat. However, this theory struggles against the scroll's straightforward, logistical tone. It reads like a practical inventory, not a mystical parable. It details specific hiding places with instructions like dig down 4 cubits or in the cavity of the old house, which strongly implies a literal physical intent. Another compelling idea is that the scroll does indeed document real treasure, but not from a single source. It could represent the combined, hidden wealth of various Jewish communities or rebel groups during the First Jewish-Roman War, a collective effort to protect their assets from the invading Romans. The cryptic descriptions would have been a necessary security measure to prevent the list from falling into enemy hands. This could account for the staggering totals if they were, in fact, an aggregation of many smaller caches from different sources. Despite numerous expeditions and searches by archaeologists and enthusiastic treasure hunters since the scroll's discovery, not a single item from its extensive list has ever been conclusively found. This complete lack of physical evidence is the biggest argument against its literal truth. Some small, unrelated artifacts have been discovered in the general region, but nothing that even remotely matches the descriptions or the scale of the copper scroll's inventory. This has led some scholars to propose it might be a work of fiction, a folk tale or a legendary account of lost treasure that was formalized and preserved on copper as a curious historical artifact. Perhaps it was a piece of creative fiction, a what-if story written on a prestigious material for a wealthy patron. The mystery endures because both possibilities are equally fascinating. If the treasure is real, it represents one of the greatest undiscovered hoards in human history, still sitting in the arid hills of Judea, waiting for someone to finally crack the 2,000-year-old code. If it is not real, then the scroll becomes a different kind of treasure, a profound historical puzzle. It forces us to ask why a community would invest such valuable resources into creating a complex and detailed fake. Was it a document of hope, a belief that their sacred treasures would be saved even if they never were? The copper scroll, therefore, is a unique paradox. It is the most tangible of the Dead Sea Scrolls made of hardy metal, yet it points to something that may be entirely intangible. It is a map that leads in 2 directions at once, one into the rocky desert landscape, and the other into the deepest hopes and fears of a people facing annihilation. Yet the map's most astonishing and controversial feature lies far to the south. Piri Reis depicted a landmass at the bottom of his chart, and he wrote a note describing this territory's warm climate and abundant wildlife. To many modern observers, this land bears a striking resemblance to the coastline of Queen Maud Land in Antarctica, but with one absolutely baffling detail. It appears to show the continent's topography not as it is today, buried under miles of ice, but as it might have looked thousands of years ago when its rocky shorelines were actually exposed. This seems to suggest that someone, long before the official discovery of Antarctica in 1820, had not only sailed there but had also accurately mapped its geography during an ice-free period, a time so remote it predates all known recorded history. This incredible possibility has sparked decades of intense debate. How could a 16th-century Ottoman admiral have access to such impossible knowledge? The most widely accepted explanation, supported by many historians, is that the southern landmass is not Antarctica at all. They argue it is a composite, a fantastical interpretation of a rumored southern continent, a common cartographic trope of the era combined with the distorted coastlines of South America. The map's lack of accurate scale and its incorporation of legendary elements support this view. In this reading, the apparent accuracy is simply a coincidence, a trick of projection that seems to align with a modern coastline only when we selectively interpret the drawing. However, the alternative theory is far more revolutionary. Proponents, like the late Professor Charles Hapgood, argue that the Peary Rise map is indeed based on far older source maps that themselves date back to an advanced seafaring civilization lost to prehistory. This ancient culture, possessing sophisticated knowledge of spherical trigonometry and accurate longitudinal measurement, would have had to conduct a global survey of the Earth, including Antarctica, at a time when it was partially free of ice, a period that ended over 6,000 years ago. These precious ancient charts, the theory goes, were preserved in the Great Library of Alexandria and were somehow copied and passed down through the ages, eventually finding their way into the hands of medieval and Renaissance cartographers like Peary Rise. This captivating idea forces us to confront profound questions about the flow of knowledge through time. It suggests that history might not be a straightforward march of progress, but a cycle where advanced understanding can be achieved, lost in cataclysms, and then only partially rediscovered millennia later. The map becomes a potential fingerprint of this forgotten epoch. Yet, the theory faces significant scientific and historical hurdles. Mainstream geology questions whether Antarctica was ever ice-free enough to reveal such coastlines within the timeline of human civilization. Furthermore, no other maps from the period show a similar level of accuracy, and no archaeological evidence has been found for such a global, prehistoric maritime culture. The true story of the Peary Rise map likely lies somewhere in the middle of these two extremes. It is almost certainly a magnificent compilation of many sources, some accurate, some speculative, and some purely mythical. It stands as a testament to the vast, interconnected world of Renaissance knowledge, where hard-won findings from explorers mingled with ancient legends and the brilliant, if sometimes flawed, interpretations of the scholars who tried to make sense of it all. It is not necessarily a literal map of an ice-free Antarctica, but it is undoubtedly a map of the human mind, a breathtaking snapshot of a world on the cusp of discovery, still filled with mysteries and eager to incorporate every fragment of knowledge, no matter how old or how strange, into its expanding view of the planet. Leaving behind the world of parchment and ink, we now travel to the Andes Mountains of Peru, to a site that presents a mystery of sheer physical presence and mind-bending engineering. High above the ancient Inca capital of Cusco, the fortress complex of Sacsayhuaman stands as a monumental puzzle carved in stone. Its most famous feature is a series of 3 zigzagging walls, built from limestone blocks so colossal they defy belief, yet fitted together with a precision that seems to belong to another world. The largest of these stones is estimated to weigh over 360 tons, that's equivalent to about 500 modern cars. And it was hauled up a steep mountainside and locked perfectly into place, all without the use of the wheel, draft animals, or iron tools. The most immediate and awe-inspiring question is how the Inca builders achieved such a feat. The standard theory suggests that thousands of laborers used ropes, log rollers, and earthen ramps to move these behemoths from quarries miles away. Yet, even with an immense workforce, the logistics of maneuvering a 300-ton stone up and down the rugged Andean terrain, and then positioning it with inexplicable accuracy, remains almost incomprehensible. This has led to more speculative ideas, including the use of plant-derived solvents to soften the stone, a technique mentioned in local legends but for which there is no archaeological evidence. Others point to the possibility of a lost vibrational or acoustic technology that could have allowed the stones to be moved more easily. though this remains firmly in the realm of fascinating conjecture. However, the true marvel of Sacsayhuamán is not just the size of the stones, but the breathtaking complexity of their assembly. The masonry style is known as ashlar polygonal, where each massive block has multiple sides and angles, some with as many as 30 or 40 distinct facets. These stones are not simple rectangles, they are intricate, multi-dimensional puzzle pieces. The builders shaped each one to interlock perfectly with all of its neighbors on every side. The joints are so tight that even after 500 years of earthquakes, it is impossible to slide a single piece of paper or a razor blade between them. This wasn't just about creating strong walls, this was a display of an almost obsessive perfectionism. The technique provided incredible seismic stability, as the interlocked stones could shift and settle during earthquakes without collapsing, but the level of craftsmanship far exceeds mere structural necessity. This incredible effort forces us to ask why. What was the true purpose of this colossal undertaking? The Spanish conquistadors who encountered it in the 16th century labeled it a fortress, and its strategic hilltop location and imposing, defensive-looking walls support that idea. Yet, the zigzag shape of the walls is peculiar for a fortress. It creates a series of deadly funnels for attackers, but it also bears a striking resemblance to lightning bolts, a symbol associated with the Inca sky god Inti. This has led many scholars to argue that Sacsayhuamán was far more than a military stronghold. It was a primary religious sanctuary, a huaca of immense spiritual power. Its name is often translated from Quechua as satisfied falcon, but it is also humorously referred to by tourists as sexy woman, a mispronunciation that obscures its likely true meaning, speckled head, possibly referring to the way the gray stones looked against the grassy hill. Within the complex, beyond the Great Walls, lies a massive circular stone structure that was almost certainly a temple or a ritual platform. The entire site was likely the stage for the most important ceremonies in the Inca Empire, including the Great Inti Raymi festival celebrating the winter solstice. In this view, the unimaginable effort expended in its construction was an act of devotion, a way to literally build their reverence for the gods and the cosmos into the very landscape. The stones themselves, fitted with such impossible precision, were a physical manifestation of the Inca worldview, that everything in the universe, from the largest boulder to the smallest grain of sand, is interconnected and must fit together in perfect harmony. Sacsayhuamán is more than a ruin. It is a permanent prayer in stone, a testament to a culture that sought to mirror the order of the heavens here on earth, and whose methods for achieving that vision remain one of the ancient world's most profound and inspiring secrets. Nestled in the remote highlands of northern Laos lies a landscape that feels both serene and deeply mysterious. Here, across dozens of sites, the earth is dotted with thousands of massive stone jars, some standing upright, others toppled over, silently enduring the passage of centuries. This is the Plain of Jars, an archaeological enigma that rivals the strangeness of any we have encountered so far. These aren't delicate pottery vessels, they are monumental urns hewn from solid rock. The largest of them stand over 3 meters tall and weigh several tons, colossal artifacts that raise a deceptively simple question: what were they for? The jars are generally attributed to an Iron Age culture that flourished from around 500 BC to as late as 500 CE, though their origins could be even older. They were painstakingly carved from local sandstone and conglomerate rock, a process that would have required immense skill and effort using rudimentary iron and stone tools. Once shaped, they were transported, likely by rolling on logs or with the use of ropes and levers, to their final positions across the plateau. The sheer scale of the endeavor suggests a sophisticated and organized society with a powerful, shared motivation driving this monumental project. The most widely accepted theory, supported by archaeological findings from limited excavations, is that the jars were funerary urns, early research by French archaeologist Madeleine Colony in the 1930s uncovered human remains, burial goods like beads and ceramics, and evidence of cremation around several jars. This points towards a complex burial practice. The bodies may have been placed inside the jars to decompose, a form of excarnation, before the bones were later collected for secondary burial elsewhere. Alternatively, the jars might have served as permanent repositories for the cremated ashes of the deceased, acting as powerful and enduring monuments to the ancestors. In this sense, the plain would be a vast, open-air cemetery, a sacred city of the dead. However, other compelling theories challenge a purely funerary purpose. Local legend offers a more colorful explanation, telling of a race of ancient giants who once inhabited the region. These giants, needing containers to brew and store enormous quantities of rice wine to celebrate a great military victory, created the jars for their festivities. Another pragmatic idea suggests the jars were massive rainwater collection units, designed to provide a reliable water supply for trade caravans traveling through the region during the dry monsoon season. The discovery of ancient Chinese trade goods and glass beads at the sites does indicate the area was on a historical trade route, lending some credence to this practical application. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of this mystery is not its ancient origin, but the modern tragedy that prevents us from solving it. During the Vietnam War, the Plain of Jars became one of the most heavily bombed regions on Earth as part of a clandestine U.S. military campaign. To this day, the landscape remains littered with countless unexploded ordnance, or UXO. These dormant bombs, hidden in the long grass and buried in the soil, have made large-scale archaeological excavation incredibly dangerous and, in many areas, utterly impossible. Demining efforts are ongoing, a slow and perilous process that means the vast majority of jar sites remain largely unexplored and completely off-limits to researchers. The very secrets of this ancient culture are guarded by the deadly remnants of a 20th century conflict. This creates a profound and frustrating limbo. We have tantalizing clues, but the full story remains locked away beneath the earth, protected by a lethal barrier. Each jar is a silent sentinel holding its secret close. Were they tombs, storage units, ritual altars, or giants' wine goblets? Until more of the plain can be safely cleared, we can only look upon this strange and solemn field and wonder about the people who went to such extraordinary lengths to shape these stones and leave their permanent mark on the world. But just as we grapple with the mysteries of a civilization's collapse in the Americas, an even more profound and ancient discovery in the Middle East is turning our understanding of human history completely on its head. In the rolling hills of southeastern Turkey, a site known as Göbekli Tepe presents a paradox so staggering it forces us to reconsider the very origins of civilization itself. Dating back to an almost incomprehensible 9600 BC, this complex predates Stonehenge by a staggering 6,000 years and the Great Pyramids by 7,000 years. It was built not by settled farmers in a thriving town, but by bands of hunter-gatherers, people we have always believed were solely focused on the day-to-day struggle for survival. Yet, here they erected what is considered the world's oldest known temple, a monument of breathtaking ambition and sophistication. The scale and artistry of Göbekli Tepe are utterly bewildering. The site consists of multiple circular enclosures, each defined by massive, T-shaped limestone pillars arranged in rings. These are not crude stones, they are finely worked monoliths, some weighing over 20 tons and standing 16 feet tall. Many are adorned with exquisite, intricate bas-relief carvings of animals, foxes, gazelles, scorpions, vultures, and lions, rendered with a skill and artistic vision that we would not expect to see for thousands of years. The builders quarried these colossal pillars from local bedrock and transported them hundreds of feet to the hilltop, a feat of logistics and engineering that would be impressive even for a sophisticated agricultural society. This reality shatters the long-held textbook narrative that humanity only began building monumental structures after we invented agriculture, settled down in villages, and developed complex social hierarchies. Göbekli Tepe boldly suggests the opposite, that it was the urge to come together to build these sacred spaces that may have actually sparked the invention of agriculture and the rise of settled life. This leads to the central, haunting question that hangs over the entire site. Why was it built, and perhaps more mysteriously, why was it so deliberately and carefully buried around 8000 BC? The prevailing theory is that Göbekli Tepe was a regional cult center, a place where nomadic groups would periodically gather for shared rituals. The animal carvings likely held deep symbolic meaning, perhaps representing guardian spirits or totemic clans. The site's location on a prominent hilltop suggests it was a known and sacred landmark visible for miles, a beacon drawing people together. This need to feed and sustain large gatherings of people during these rituals could have provided the crucial impetus for early experiments with cultivating wild grains, effectively planting the seeds of the Neolithic Revolution right there on the surrounding plains. As for its burial, the mystery only deepens. This was not an abandonment or a catastrophe. Archaeologists have found that each enclosure was meticulously backfilled with an incredible amount of soil, stone, and animal bones, preserving the structures perfectly for millennia. This was a conscious, coordinated, and enormous effort. Was it an act of reverence? Were they entombing a sacred place that had served its purpose, protecting it from desecration for all time? Or was it a purposeful act of forgetting, a way for a changing society to symbolically break with an old religious order and its powerful priesthood? We may never know the specific ritual or crisis that prompted this decision, but the result is what allowed Göbekli Tepe to survive in such a remarkable state of preservation, waiting silently for 12,000 years to deliver its revolutionary message to the modern world. It stands as a humbling reminder that our ancestors were far more complex, creative, and capable than we ever imagined, and that the story of humanity's greatest leaps forward is still being uncovered, one astonishing stone at a time. But even as we marvel at a site that fundamentally rewrites our past, we must turn to a story that represents one of history's most tantalizing and enduring vanishing acts. This tale comes not from stone monuments, but from the shifting sands of the Egyptian desert, and it begins with the ancient Greek historian Herodotus, often called the father of history. Around 420 BC, Herodotus recorded an account of a catastrophic event that had occurred roughly a century earlier. According to his writings, the Persian emperor Cambyses II, son of Cyrus the Great, sent a massive army of 50,000 men from the city of Thebes to attack the oracle of Ammon at the Siwa oasis. The oracle had refused to legitimize Cambyses' rule over Egypt, a profound insult that demanded a brutal response. The army set out on its 7-day march across the desert, but it never arrived at its destination. Herodotus reports that as the soldiers were resting and eating their midday meal, a ferocious sandstorm, Akomzin, swept down from the south with unparalleled fury. The swirling, suffocating sands buried the entire army alive, leaving no trace behind. 50,000 men, along with all their weapons, supplies, and animals, simply vanished into the emptiness of the Great Sand Sea. The story has all the elements of a perfect historical mystery: a powerful emperor, a sacred destination, and a colossal force wiped out by an act of God. But for centuries, it has lived in a nebulous space between history and legend. The central question is stark: did this event actually happen, or was it a compelling myth concocted by Herodotus, who was known to occasionally blend fact with colorful anecdote? The sheer scale of the loss seems almost unbelievable. 50,000 soldiers would represent one of the largest military forces in the ancient world, and the complete disappearance of such a host, with no archaeological evidence ever found, stretches credibility for many scholars. Some historians argue that Herodotus, who relied on stories told to him by Egyptian priests, may have been fed a piece of political propaganda. The tale could serve as a powerful narrative of divine retribution, a story where the Egyptian god Ammon protects his own and destroys the impious foreign invaders who dared to threaten his oracle. In this view, the lost army is not a historical fact but a moral fable. Yet, the persistence of the story and the very real dangers of the Egyptian desert have kept the hunt alive. Modern expeditions armed with ground-penetrating radar, satellite imagery, and metal detectors have ventured into the vast and treacherous dunes west of the Nile, hoping to find some proof. The challenges are immense. The landscape is constantly changing, with sand dunes that can shift dozens of feet in a single storm, potentially revealing a secret one year and burying it forever the next. Any remains would be scattered over a huge area and buried under many meters of sand, making discovery a matter of incredible luck as much as technology. There have been tantalizing but ultimately inconclusive finds. In the 1990s, a team led by geologist Tom Brown claimed to have found ancient arrowheads and daggers, but the findings were disputed and could not be definitively linked to a Persian army. Another expedition uncovered fragments of textiles and metal that suggested a large military presence, but again, nothing that could be conclusively tied to Cambyses's doomed campaign. This lack of evidence opens the door to alternative theories beyond the sandstorm. Perhaps the army did not simply vanish. Could it have been ambushed and annihilated by hostile desert tribes? Might the soldiers have become disoriented and perished from thirst, their remains scattered across ancient caravan routes? Or, in a more dramatic twist, did a large contingent simply mutiny, deciding to desert their harsh emperor and vanish into the hinterlands of Africa to establish their own community, their fate lost to history? The desert is a master at keeping secrets, and the sheer size of the search area means that the truth, whatever it may be, could still be out there. The story of the lost army of Cambyses endures because it taps into our primal fear of the unknown and the power of nature. It is a reminder that the desert can swallow entire worlds without a trace, leaving behind only a whisper on the wind. A story that challenges us to separate fact from fiction and wonder if, one day, the shifting sands will finally decide to give up their oldest secret. Journeying from the scorching deserts of Egypt to the arid, wind-swept wastes of western China, we encounter a mystery not of lost armies or sunken cities, but of people themselves. In the parched, salty earth of the Tarim Basin, a discovery was made that would stop historians in their tracks and forcefully rewrite chapters of early human migration. Here, buried in the Taklamakan Desert, a name that ominously translates to place of no return, archaeologists unearthed hundreds of naturally mummified bodies dating back as far as 4,000 years. Their preservation is astonishing. Their leather boots, felt hats, and finely woven twill woolen garments are almost perfectly intact, but it was their faces that caused a global sensation. These individuals, who lived around 1800 BC, have strikingly Caucasian features, long noses, deep-set eyes, fair hair, and tall statures. They are unmistakably Western in appearance. Their very existence in the heart of Asia, millennia before the Silk Road, presents a profound historical paradox. The immediate and haunting question is one of identity. Who were these people, and what were they doing in one of the most inhospitable regions on Earth so long ago? Their grave goods offer some clues to their daily lives but deepen the cultural mystery. They were buried with baskets of wheat and millet, suggesting agriculture, but also with implements for cheesemaking, linking them to pastoral traditions. They wore felted wool caps adorned with feathers and strikingly tall, pointed hats that some scholars connect to the cultic practices of Bronze Age shamans. The most famous of them all, the so-called Beauty of Lulan, was found with a simple wooden comb still tucked in her beautifully braided hair, a poignant human detail that makes their story all the more compelling and immediate. For decades, the leading theory pointed to the Tocharians, an Indo-European speaking people known from much later manuscripts found in the region. It was believed these mummies represented an early migration of proto-Tocharians from the steppes of Western Eurasia, a branch that split off and traveled incredibly far east. This theory suggested that the Tarim Basin was a much earlier crossroads of east and west than anyone had previously imagined, a meeting point of cultures millennia before official histories recorded it. However, recent advances in ancient DNA analysis have complicated the picture in fascinating ways. Genomic studies published in 2021 revealed that these mummies were not newcomers to the area at all. They were not the descendants of recent migrants from the Black Sea steppes or elsewhere in the West. Instead, they were a local, isolated population, a relic of a much older, indigenous group of Pleistocene hunter-gatherers who had once populated large parts of Eurasia during the last ice age. This genetic revelation is a stunning twist. It means these seemingly Western people were actually the direct descendants of an ancient Eurasian population that had largely disappeared elsewhere, replaced by later waves of farmers and herders. They were a living window into a deep prehistoric past, surviving in isolation in this desert basin. Their distinct appearance wasn't the result of a recent long-distance journey, but of being a preserved remnant of a world that had otherwise vanished. This completely upends the narrative of a large-scale European migration into the area at this time, forcing a re-evaluation of how and when cultural and genetic exchanges actually occurred across the continent. Yet the mystery is far from solved. If they were this isolated ancient lineage, how did they acquire what appear to be technological innovations from elsewhere? Their wheel-making technology and their methods of weaving twill cloth are strikingly similar to those found in cultures from the European steppes. This creates a tantalizing puzzle. Were they completely isolated, or did they have some form of long-distance cultural contact that allowed them to adopt and adapt these advanced techniques without significant genetic mixing? Their very presence challenges our neat models of ancient human movement, suggesting that ideas and technologies could sometimes travel faster and farther than people themselves, leaping across cultural boundaries in ways we are only beginning to understand. The Tarim mummies stand as a powerful testament to the complexity of our shared human story, a reminder that the ancient world was far more interconnected and yet in some ways far more isolated than we ever knew. While the idea of a lost army swallowed by the desert captures our imagination, our next mystery presents a different kind of anomaly, one that fits in the palm of your hand, yet has sparked a debate that stretches across millions of years. This is the curious case of the London Hammer, an artifact that seems to defy the very timeline of human history. It was discovered in 1936 by a couple hiking near London, Texas, who noticed a curious piece of rock with a chunk of wood protruding from it. When they cracked it open, they found inside what appeared to be a perfectly formed iron hammer with a wooden handle. This in itself would be an unremarkable find if not for the staggering context. The rock concretion that encased it was identified as dating back to the Cretaceous period, a time over 100 million years ago when dinosaurs still roamed the Earth. At first glance, the implications are staggering. If this hammer is truly as old as the rock that held it, it would mean that a human or human-like intelligence was present on Earth tens of millions of years before our earliest ancestors are supposed to have evolved. It's a premise so revolutionary that it has fueled endless speculation about time travelers, ancient advanced civilizations, or even creationist theories that seek to challenge established scientific timelines. The hammer itself looks deceptively modern. The head is made of iron that chemical analysis shows is of a very pure quality, with low impurities, and the wooden handle is partially coalified, a process that occurs over immense periods of time under pressure. However, before we rewrite the history books, we must turn to the more grounded and far more likely geological explanations. geologists and archaeologists point to a common and well-understood natural process called concretion. In certain conditions, particularly with mineral-rich water, objects can become encased in a hard, rock-like shell of limestone or other minerals. This process can happen relatively quickly in geological terms, over centuries or a few millennia, not millions of years. The specific nodule that contained the hammer was found in a Cretaceous-era rock formation, but the concretion itself could have formed much later around a more recent object. The hammer could have been dropped or left behind a few hundred years ago, and the unique local conditions caused it to be cemented into a hard shell that merely looks like the ancient surrounding rock to the untrained eye. Further examination supports this more conventional view. While the exact age of the hammerhead is difficult to pin down, its design is consistent with hammers used in American mining communities in the 18th or 19th centuries. The handle's partial coalification is also not proof of immense age. It can be achieved through a process like the natural creation of coal, but on a much smaller and faster scale if the wood is subjected to the right combination of water, pressure, and minerals. Essentially, the hammer is almost certainly a genuine historical tool, but its stone prison is a geological illusion, a trick of nature that made it appear far older than it truly is. The enduring debate around the London hammer is less about the object itself and more about what it represents in the broader conversation of history and science. For proponents of alternative historical theories, it is a key piece of evidence in a category called out-of-place artifacts, or OOP arts objects that seem to exist outside their expected time and place. They argue that mainstream science is too quick to dismiss such finds to protect the established paradigm. For skeptics, it is a perfect example of how a lack of proper context and scientific rigor can lead to extraordinary but false conclusions. The true story of the London hammer is a cautionary tale about the importance of context in archaeology. An object is meaningless without understanding the circumstances of its discovery. Was it truly found in situ within a solid Cretaceous rock layer, or was it merely resting near one? The original discoverers were amateurs, not archaeologists, and the precise details of the find were not professionally documented, leaving room for interpretation and misinterpretation. Ultimately, the hammer remains a fascinating oddity, a physical Rorschach test that tells us more about our own desire to find evidence of the extraordinary than it does about the distant past. It challenges us to question, but also to apply critical thinking. It reminds us that the world is full of natural wonders that can easily be mistaken for the supernatural, and that the real story of our planet's history, as written in its rocks and fossils, is strange and magnificent enough on its own. But if the Voynich Manuscript is defined by its unreadable text, our next mysterious book is famous for one terrifying and unforgettable image. Housed within the National Library of Sweden in Stockholm is a volume of such immense size and weight that it has earned the name Codex Gigas, or the Giant Book. More famously, it is known around the world as the Devil's Bible. This is not an exaggeration. The Codex is the largest known medieval manuscript in existence, a behemoth requiring 2 people to lift. Bound in wooden leather-covered boards, its pages are made from the skins of an estimated 160 donkeys, a testament to the staggering scale of its production. Within its massive covers lies a complete Latin Vulgate Bible, but also a collection of other crucial medieval texts, including historical chronicles, medical formulas, and exorcism rites. It is a complete library unto itself, a compendium of the knowledge its creators deemed most essential. Yet, for all its scholarly content, it is remembered for one thing above all else: a chilling, full-page portrait of the devil himself, staring out from the parchment with haunting intensity. The legend surrounding its creation is as monumental as the book itself. The story, passed down through centuries, claims the Codex was the work of a single Benedictine monk from the Podlages Monastery in Bohemia, now part of the Czech Republic. This monk had broken his monastic vows and was sentenced to be walled up alive, a terrifying death. In a desperate plea for mercy, he promised his superiors that he would create, in a single night, a book that would contain all human knowledge and bring everlasting glory to the monastery. As the night wore on, he realized the impossible nature of his task. In his darkest moment, he prayed not to God, but to the fallen archangel Lucifer, asking him to complete the work in exchange for his soul. Satan agreed, and the monk added the infamous devilish portrait as a tribute to his otherworldly benefactor, signing the pact with his own damnation. This thrilling tale, of course, is a physical impossibility. The codex is written in a single, consistent hand, a remarkable example of calligraphic uniformity. However, based on the script style and the historical events recorded within, experts estimate its creation would have taken not one night, but a minimum of 20 to 30 years of continuous, dedicated labor for a single scribe working in isolation. This time frame immediately dismantles the legend's core premise, but it replaces it with an even more profound historical mystery. If it wasn't forged in a diabolical pact, why was it made? What could possibly justify such an immense investment of time, resources, and skill? The prevailing theory among historians is that the codex was never intended to be a book for reading or study in the conventional sense. Its sheer size makes it utterly impractical for daily use. Instead, it was likely created as a prestige object, a symbol of immense wealth and piety designed to elevate the status of the monastery that commissioned it. In the highly competitive religious landscape of the Middle Ages, possessing such an awe-inspiring artifact would have been a powerful draw for pilgrims and patrons, attracting donations and cementing the monastery's reputation. It was a statement piece, a physical manifestation of divine favor and institutional power, meant to be displayed and revered, not perused. The inclusion of the devil's portrait, far from being a tribute, would have served as a common medieval memento mori, a stark reminder of the ever-present dangers of sin and the hellish fate that awaited those who strayed from the path of righteousness. It was the ultimate foil to the holy texts that surrounded it, emphasizing the eternal struggle between good and evil. Yet, the mystery of its origin is matched by the puzzle of its journey. The Codex's history is a tumultuous trail across Europe. It was seized as spoils of war by the Swedish army from the Prague Castle during the 30 Years' War in 1648 and has remained in Sweden ever since. Why was such a monumental, revered text taken? Its value was clearly recognized, but its removal from its cultural and religious context adds another layer of intrigue to its story. The Codex Gigas, therefore, stands as a monumental paradox. It is a work of profound devotion containing the Word of God, yet it is forever linked to the ultimate symbol of evil. It is a book of immense practical knowledge, yet it was likely too large to ever be used practically. It is a testament to a single scribe's lifetime of devotion, yet his name is lost to history, overshadowed by a fantastical legend of a deal with the devil. It challenges our understanding of medieval motivation, forcing us to look past the thrilling myth and appreciate the true, awe-inspiring reality of human ambition and the lengths we will go to create something that truly lasts. Yet another mystery lies submerged not in sand, but in the crystal-clear waters off the coast of Japan, a discovery that forces us to question not only the history of human civilization, but also the very line between natural wonder and artificial creation. This is the enigmatic Yonaguni Monument, a sprawling, awe-inspiring structure resting on the seafloor near the remote island of Yonaguni, the westernmost point of Japan. Discovered in 1986 by a local diver seeking new sites to observe hammerhead sharks, the formation immediately captured global attention. It consists of massive sandstone blocks forming what appear to be gigantic, architecturally perfect terraces, starkly vertical walls, and surprisingly sharp 90-degree angles. The centerpiece is a vast, stepped monolithic structure that rises over 80 feet from the ocean floor, often compared to a stepped pyramid or a grand ziggurat from the ancient world. Its sheer presence is breathtaking, and it immediately presents a profound and divisive question. Are we looking at a magnificent natural geological formation, or the sunken ruins of a city built by a sophisticated prehistoric culture? The case for the Yonaguni Monument being a man-made complex is passionately argued by researchers like Professor Masaaki Kimura, a marine geologist from the University of the Ryukyus who has spent decades studying the site. He and his team point to a number of compelling features that seem to defy natural explanation. They highlight two massive, perfectly vertical pillars that appear to support a large, overhead ledge, a structure that looks suspiciously like a monumental gate or a trilithon. Elsewhere, they identify what they call a stage, a flat, isolated rock platform, and surrounding it, carved channels and depressions that could be interpreted as drainage ditches or roads. Most strikingly, they point to a carved relief that resembles a crude human face, alongside other formations that look like animal figures, suggesting intentional artistic design. If these interpretations are correct, the implications are staggering. The monument is submerged in water deep enough to have been above sea level only at the end of the last glacial period, around 10,000 years ago. This would place its construction in a time far older than any known pyramid, potentially making it a relic of a lost civilization from a forgotten epoch, a real-world counterpart to the myth of Atlantis. However, the scientific mainstream, represented by many geologists, offers a powerful and equally compelling counter-argument. They contend that the Yonaguni Monument is a spectacular but entirely natural formation. They attribute its bizarrely angular appearance to a combination of tectonic activity and relentless underwater erosion. The region sits in a highly active seismic zone where powerful earthquakes are common. This tectonic force can fracture the sandstone bedrock along natural parallel planes and joints, creating the remarkably straight lines and sharp corners we observe. The primary force shaping the monument, they argue, is the strong underwater currents that constantly sweep the area. These currents would selectively erode the softer layers of rock, leaving behind the harder, more resistant sandstone in these dramatic stepped formations. This process, known as differential erosion, is common around the world and can create incredibly geometric and seemingly artificial landscapes entirely through natural means. The famous Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland is a classic example of nature producing astonishingly precise geometric shapes without any human intervention. For these skeptics, the carved faces and animal figures are simply examples of pareidolia, the human brain's natural tendency to see familiar patterns like faces in random shapes. The debate is further complicated by the site's challenging environment. Strong currents and its depth make prolonged archaeological investigation difficult and dangerous. While some divers have reported finding what they believe to be stone tools and a primitive loom in the vicinity, these claims are heavily disputed and have not been verified by mainstream archaeological bodies. The absence of any pottery shards, charcoal from fires, human remains, or other undeniable artifacts that would typically surround a human settlement is a significant point against the man-made theory. A truly inhabited city would leave behind more than just carved rock. It would leave the unmistakable debris of daily life. This leaves us suspended between two equally fascinating possibilities. If the monument is natural, it stands as one of the most breathtaking and deceptive wonders of the geological world, a place that perfectly mimics the ruins of a grand ancient city. If it is artificial, it forces a radical rewrite of human history, suggesting that advanced monumental architecture emerged not with the Sumerians or Egyptians, but thousands of years earlier, only to be lost when rising seas consumed its creators. Perhaps the most satisfying answer lies somewhere in the middle. It is possible that the core structure is a natural formation, but that it was recognized and modified by ancient humans. A prehistoric culture could have found this uniquely geometric outcrop, quarried it for stone, enhanced its steps and terraces for their own ceremonial purposes, and left their mark upon it before the ocean finally took it back. The Yonaguni monument, in its silent, aqueous grandeur, does not offer easy answers. It serves as a permanent invitation to explore, to question, and to wonder what other secrets are still hidden beneath the waves, waiting for the currents to shift and reveal just a little more of the truth. Deep within the crypts of the Hathor Temple at Dendera in Egypt, a series of enigmatic reliefs carved into the sandstone walls have sparked a debate that perfectly encapsulates the clash between mainstream archaeology and alternative history. The most famous of these shows a large, ovular object reminiscent of a modern incandescent light bulb. Inside this bulb, a snake extends along its length, its head pointed toward what could be interpreted as a socket or a lotus flower. A cable-like cord seems to run from the base of this object to a box upon which a kneeling figure rests, while a standing figure appears to be supporting the entire apparatus. To the modern eye, conditioned by our own technology, the resemblance to an electrical device is uncanny and instantly provocative. This image has become the cornerstone of a compelling theory that the ancient Egyptians possessed or at least understood the principles of electricity. Proponents of this view, like the authors Erich von Däniken and Peter Krasser, have dissected the image with a technological lens. They interpret the ovular object as a giant glass bulb, the snake inside as a stylized filament, and the box as a power source, perhaps an early battery not unlike the speculated Baghdad battery. The cord is seen as an electrical cable, and the two figures are cast in the roles of operator and technician. They point to the absence of soot in the deep, enclosed spaces of certain tombs and temples as potential evidence that the Egyptians must have had a form of electric lighting to execute their intricate artwork, arguing that torches or oil lamps would have left pervasive residue and consumed precious oxygen in these sealed chambers. The relief in this narrative is not symbolic art but a technical diagram, a lasting record of a lost technology that has since been forgotten by history. This interpretation, however, is overwhelmingly rejected by Egyptologists and mainstream archaeologists, who offer a far different yet equally fascinating explanation rooted in the complex world of Egyptian mythology. They identify the central scene not as a technical workshop but as a profound moment of creation. The bulb is not a light bulb at all, but a representation of the primordial womb or a lotus flower from which the sun god in his serpent form is being born into the world. In Egyptian cosmology, the snake is a potent symbol of divine energy and protection, often associated with gods. The figure holding the object is not an electrician, but a deity, often interpreted as Her, the god of infinity, supporting this moment of cosmic genesis. The cable is likely a stylized depiction of a lotus stem or an umbilical cord, connecting the newborn sun god to the fertile mud of creation represented by the box, which symbolizes the primordial mound. The entire scene is surrounded by other, more clearly symbolic figures, including the Djed pillar, a symbol of stability, and the baboon god, associated with the rising sun. This mythological context provides a coherent framework that the electrical theory lacks. The absence of any other corroborating evidence is a critical point for skeptics. If the Egyptians had electric light, where are the remnants of the bulbs themselves, the widespread wiring, or the generators? The soot-free chamber argument is also countered by the fact that ancient artisans could have used highly polished metal mirrors to reflect sunlight deep into tombs or employed cleverly designed, ventilated lamps using animal fats that burn relatively cleanly. The Dendera reliefs are not an isolated anomaly. They are part of a rich tapestry of religious iconography that adorned the temple, a place dedicated to Hathor, the goddess of joy, motherhood, and love, not a center for advanced electrical engineering. Ultimately, the Dendera light controversy is a powerful case study in the challenge of interpreting ancient symbols through a modern lens. It highlights a fundamental divide in how we connect with the past. One side sees ingenuity and a potential technological parallel, a thrilling possibility that our ancestors were more advanced than we give them credit for. The other sees a sophisticated and complex spiritual worldview, expressed through a symbolic language we are still learning to fully decipher. The truth of the Dendera relief likely lies not in a forgotten power grid, but in the profound Egyptian understanding of the cycle of life, death, and rebirth, where the light being depicted is not electric, but divine, the eternal light of the sun itself, emerging from the darkness to begin a new day. While the ancient world offers puzzles from the distant past, some of the most chilling and contemporary mysteries were erected within living memory. In 1980, a striking and enigmatic monument appeared in a rural field in Elbert County, Georgia. Known as the Georgia Guidestones, this massive granite structure consisted of 4 towering slabs, each 16 feet high and weighing over 42,000 pounds, capped by a heavy roof stone and accompanied by a nearby granite slab set in the ground. Its modern, precise construction stood in stark contrast to the ancient megaliths we've explored, yet its purpose was far more cryptic. The stones were engraved with 10 guiding principles, written in 8 different modern languages: English, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, Chinese, and Russian, with a shorter message in 4 ancient scripts: Babylonian, Classical Greek, Sanskrit, and Egyptian hieroglyphics etched into the capstone. These weren't historical records, they were instructions for a future age. The messages themselves are a blend of pragmatic environmentalism and unsettling social engineering. The first guideline reads, "Maintain humanity under 500,000,000 in perpetual balance with nature." This call for a drastic reduction of the global population from billions to a fraction of its current size immediately sparked controversy and alarm. Other principles advocate for guiding reproduction wisely to improve fitness and diversity, unifying humanity with a new universal language, and ruling passion and faith with tempered reason. The monument also functions as an astronomical calendar, with a hole drilled through one stone to align with the North Star and a slot that marks the sun's solstices and equinoxes. This fusion of Cold War-era angst, New Age philosophy, and futuristic vision created a monument that was impossible to ignore and even harder to understand. The mystery of the Guidestones begins with their origin. The entire project was commissioned by a man or group operating under the pseudonym R.C. Christian, a name that many believe is a tribute to the legendary founder of the Rosicrucian order, Christian Rosencreutz. In 1979, Christian walked into the office of the Elbert County Granite Finishing Company and laid out his elaborate plans to President Joe Fendley. He claimed to represent a small group of loyal Americans who had been planning this project for decades, but he refused to reveal his own identity or the identities of his sponsors. He paid for the massive project upfront and vanished back into obscurity as soon as the stones were erected, leaving behind no clues to his true motives or identity. This anonymity fueled endless speculation about the sponsors. Were they a secret society, a group of wealthy survivalists preparing for a coming apocalypse, or perhaps well-intentioned intellectuals hoping to leave a beacon of guidance for a future civilization that had collapsed and needed to rebuild? This ambiguity, coupled with the shocking content of the messages, made the Guidestones a lightning rod for conspiracy theories and public debate. For some, they were a hopeful blueprint for a sustainable, peaceful future. For others, they were a dystopian manifesto, a monument to elitism and population control that evoked the darkest fears of global domination. Its location in the heart of the American South, combined with its mysterious, anonymous patronage, made it a frequent target for protests and vandalism over the decades. The controversy culminated in a series of attacks in 2022. In July, the stones were severely damaged by an explosion, and later that same year, county authorities, citing safety concerns and the cost of repair, made the decision to dismantle the entire structure completely. The rubble was later demolished into gravel, erasing the monument from the landscape as suddenly as it had appeared. The destruction did not solve the mystery, it only deepened it. The physical guide was gone, but the questions it raised remained. Was the demolition an act of erasing a dangerous ideology, or was it the destruction of a unique, if controversial, piece of modern architectural art? The violent end of the Georgia Guidestones feels like a chapter ripped from a thriller, transforming an already puzzling monument into a modern-day relic of a hidden war of ideas. We are left to wonder if the anonymous creators ever anticipated the fierce reaction their work would provoke. The stones were meant to speak across millennia to guide a future society. Instead, they held up a mirror to our own time, reflecting our deepest anxieties about power, control, and survival. They stand as a stark reminder that mystery is not confined to the ancient past. It can be manufactured, erected in a quiet field, and leave behind a legacy of questions long after the last stone has been carted away. Shifting from the cryptic messages of modern monuments to a relic that is both profoundly ancient and deeply personal, we arrive at perhaps the most debated and emotionally charged object in human history. This is the Shroud of Turin, a simple length of linen cloth that has, for centuries, held the world in a thrall of devotion, skepticism, and utter bewilderment. To the naked eye, it appears to bear the faint, straw-colored imprint of a crucified man, front and back, as if the body had been laid lengthwise on one half of the shroud and the other half drawn over the top. The image shows all the wounds corresponding to the biblical accounts of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Scourge marks across the back and legs, puncture wounds at the wrists and feet, a lance wound in the side, and even what appears to be blood matted in the scalp from a crown of thorns. For millions of the faithful, this is not a representation. It is the actual burial cloth of Christ, a divine relic that captures the very moment of resurrection. For skeptics, it is a masterful, albeit mysterious, medieval forgery. And for scientists, it is an enigma that has resisted every attempt at a definitive explanation, making it a perfect storm of faith, history, and science. The modern history of the shroud is well documented. It has been owned by the House of Savoy, Italy's former royal family, since the 15th century and has been kept in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin since 1694. Its journey before that is shrouded in legend and controversy. One theory traces it back to the image of Edessa, a holy relic sent by Jesus himself to King Abgar according to early Christian tradition. Another places it in the possession of the Knights Templar after the Crusades. However, its first certain historical appearance was in 1354, when a French knight named Geoffroy de Charny deposited it in a church he built in Liéry, France. This documented emergence in the 14th century would become the cornerstone of the argument against its authenticity. That argument seemed to receive its most powerful scientific validation in 1988. In a landmark event, the Vatican permitted a rigorous radiocarbon dating analysis. Small samples from a corner of the shroud were divided and sent to 3 independent, world-renowned laboratories at the University of Oxford, the University of Arizona, and the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. Using accelerator mass spectrometry, all 3 labs arrived at strikingly consistent results. They each dated the linen fibers to between 1260 and 1390 CE with a 95% confidence level. This placed the shroud's origin squarely in the Middle Ages, a time when the creation and veneration of religious relics, both real and forged, was a widespread practice across Europe. For many, this was the final, conclusive word. The shroud was a medieval artifact and the mystery was solved. Yet, the story did not end there. Almost immediately, questions were raised about the carbon dating process. Critics pointed out that the sample taken came from a corner of the shroud that had been handled, mended, and possibly contaminated over centuries. Could the sample have been from a medieval repair patch woven into the original cloth, rather than the original itself? Others proposed that a fire in 1532, which damaged the shroud and left its distinctive scorch marks and water stains, could have introduced carbon contaminants that skewed the dating results. A modern bacterial or fungal biofilm on the threads could have the same effect. While these critiques have not overturned the carbon dating in the eyes of the scientific mainstream, they have kept the door open for continued debate, demonstrating that even the most rigorous tests can be challenged when applied to such a unique and complex object. But the real, enduring heart of the mystery is not its age, but the image itself. How was it made? This question has proven to be the true stumbling block for every theory. The image is not painted. There are no pigments, no dyes, no brushstrokes. It is a superficial discoloration, only penetrating the topmost fibers of the linen threads. Astonishingly, the image possesses properties that seem to defy medieval technology. It is a perfect photographic negative. When viewed in negative, the faint, puzzling positive image transforms into a starkly clear and detailed picture of a human face and body. This means that centuries before the invention of photography, the shroud's creator would have needed to understand and execute a process that creates a perfect negative image, a concept that simply did not exist at the time. Furthermore, the image has a three-dimensional quality. When analyzed with advanced VP8 image analyzers developed for the NASA space program, the intensity of the discoloration on the cloth can be mapped to create an accurate three-dimensional relief of the body, something no known painting or artistic technique can replicate. The bloodstains, however, behaved differently. They were transferred to the cloth before the body image was formed. An analysis suggests they are composed of real human blood, type AB, with traces of bilirubin, a compound that would be present in the blood of someone who had endured severe trauma. So we have an image with the precision of a photograph and the data of a 3D scan, yet it was created by an unknown process on a piece of medieval linen. This has led to a plethora of theories, each with its own merits and flaws. Skeptics propose it could be an early form of photography, perhaps using a camera obscura and silver compounds on the linen, or a technique involving acid or vapors to selectively bleach the fibers. Yet, no one has been able to perfectly recreate the shroud's unique combination of superficial coloration, negative encoding, and 3D information using only medieval materials and knowledge. Other explanations point to natural processes. Some scientists suggest a rare form of energy release, perhaps a burst of radiation from the body at the moment of resurrection, could have caused a reaction that scorched the image onto the cloth. This remains highly speculative, but it highlights the lengths to which science must go to explain the unexplained. The Shroud of Turin, therefore, exists in a unique space. It is an object that science has seemingly dated yet cannot replicate. It is a relic that inspires deep faith yet is surrounded by historical uncertainty. It challenges believers and skeptics alike to confront the limits of their understanding, serving as a permanent, silent question mark at the intersection of the material and the divine. While the tragic disappearance of Cambyses's army in Egypt remains a story passed down by a historian, the fate of our next city is a matter of recorded, witnessed history, a catastrophe that became a lasting legend in its own right. This is the story of the lost city of Helike, a powerful and prosperous member of the Achaean League in ancient Greece. In the winter of 373 BC, the city suffered a devastating and complex natural disaster. The Greek writer Pausanias, writing centuries later, described the terrifying signs that preceded the event. For 5 days, all manner of small animals, mice, snakes, and weasels, were seen fleeing the city, heading for higher ground. Then, on a single horrific night, a massive earthquake struck, toppling every building, but the destruction did not end there. the quake's movement triggered a catastrophic subsidence of the entire coastal plain. The land gave way and the waters of the Corinthian Gulf rushed in to claim the ruins. As if that weren't enough, a towering tsunami followed, sweeping over the area and drowning any survivors who might have escaped the initial collapse. By morning, Helike was gone, utterly erased beneath the sea. All that remained of the once great city were the tips of its tallest bronze statues, barely visible above the waves, a haunting glimpse of the glory that now lay submerged. For centuries, Helike became a real-world analog to the myth of Atlantis, a cautionary tale remembered by sailors and writers. Ancient authors like Strabo and Ovid referenced it, and its story was well known in the classical world. It was said that the city's destruction was an act of divine wrath from the god Poseidon, whom the Helicans had offended by refusing to surrender a sacred statue of his to a group of visiting ambassadors, or by denying strangers access to his temple. The god of the sea and earthquakes had, according to the legend, reclaimed his domain with brutal finality. Yet, unlike Atlantis, Helike was not a legend from a 9,000-year-old story. It was a historical city that had existed and thrived, and its demise was a documented event within the classical era. This factual core made its complete disappearance and the subsequent loss of its location one of the most frustrating puzzles in archaeology. How could an entire city, known to have existed in a specific region, simply vanish without a trace? The search for Helike became a sort of holy grail for explorers and archaeologists. For nearly 2,000 years, its exact location remained a mystery. The shifting coastal sediments and the changes in the shoreline over millennia had buried any potential clues under layers of silt and soil. Early modern searches focused on finding the telltale bronze statue tips mentioned in the ancient texts, scouring the seabed near the modern coastal villages. But nothing was found, and many began to wonder if the ancient accounts had been exaggerated. The breakthrough finally came in the 1980s and 90s, led by a determined Greek archaeologist, Dora Katsanopoulou. Instead of looking out to sea, her team considered the other part of the ancient story, the land subsidence. They hypothesized that over centuries, the sediments from nearby rivers had actually filled in the lagoon that had swallowed the city, burying it not under the modern sea, but under the solid ground of the coastal plain. This shift in strategy proved to be the key. Using ground-penetrating radar and studying ancient texts that described the city's distance from a river, they zeroed in on a location near the modern village of Rizamilos. In 2001, their perseverance paid off. They began to uncover the remains of a classical Greek city, not at the bottom of the sea, but buried beneath many feet of compacted sediment. They found walls, pottery, coins, and a metallurgical workshop, all dating to the right period. Most tellingly, they uncovered a destroyed building with crushed pottery inside, its ruins capped by a layer of marine shells and lagoon sediments, clear evidence of a sudden catastrophic event involving both earthquake and saltwater. It was a monumental discovery, seemingly solving a mystery that was over 2 millennia old. However, the story does not end with a simple confirmation. While the discovered site is almost certainly the remains of ancient Helike, the elusive heart of the city, its main public agora and its famed Temple of Poseidon have still not been definitively located. Some structures may yet lie further out beneath the waters of the Gulf or buried even deeper under the plain. The search continues, a meticulous process of peeling back the layers of earth and time. The story of Helike's rediscovery is a powerful testament to the relentless curiosity of archaeologists. It demonstrates how a blend of ancient texts, geological understanding, and modern technology can collaborate to bring a lost city back into the light. But it also serves as a sobering reminder of nature's immense power. Helike's fate is a stark example of how a single night of tectonic violence can completely wipe a thriving community off the map, leaving only whispers and fragments behind, challenging future generations to piece together the story of its final terrible hours. Yet another tale that blurs the line between archaeological discovery and science fiction brings us to the high, remote borderlands between China and Tibet. Here, the story of the Dropa stones begins in 1938, according to an account that feels more like a pulp adventure novel than a scientific report. A Chinese archaeologist named Kai Pu-te is said to have been leading an expedition through the Bayan Karaula Mountains when they stumbled upon a series of caves. Inside, they made a bizarre and unsettling discovery. The caves showed clear signs of habitation, but were also filled with rows of graves containing the skeletons of a very peculiar people. The bodies were small, delicate, and oddly proportioned, with oversized, rounded skulls that did not resemble any known human ancestry. Scattered across the cave floor, partially buried in the dust, were hundreds of stone discs roughly a foot in diameter. Each disc had a perfect, precise hole in its center, and spiraling out from that center was a continuous, fine groove containing a series of tiny, unknown hieroglyphic characters. The discs, it was claimed, were ancient phonograph records, a library of information waiting to be decoded. The narrative then leaps forward 2 decades to the early 1960s, when a scientist named Tsum Nui supposedly managed to crack the code. His translation, as the story goes, revealed a truly extraordinary tale. The hieroglyphs told of a spacecraft from a distant planet that crashed in the mountains 12,000 years ago. The survivors, a people who called themselves the Dropa, were unable to repair their ship and found themselves stranded on Earth. The local tribes, the Ham, initially hunted and killed many of these strange-looking beings. Eventually, a fragile peace was established, but the Dropa could not adapt to our planet's environment and gradually died out. The stones were their recorded history, a tragic account of their exile and demise, left behind as a testament to their existence. It is an incredible story, one that taps directly into our fascination with ancient astronauts and lost civilizations. The problem, however, is that there is virtually no credible evidence to support any part of it. The entire account is built on a foundation of sand. The key figures Kai Pu-te and Tsum Nui are unverifiable. No records of their academic positions or publications exist outside of the stories about the stones themselves. The very name Tsum Nui is not a standard Chinese name, further fueling skepticism. Despite claims that the discs were examined in Moscow and Beijing, no major museums or academic institutions have ever admitted to having these artifacts in their collections. No photographs of the discs in situ, no archaeological field reports, and no peer-reviewed scientific papers documenting their composition or the inscriptions have ever been produced. In the world of serious archaeology, the Dropa stones are considered a complete fiction, a modern myth that emerged during the flying saucer craze of the 1960s. So, if they are a hoax, how did this story take hold and persist for so long? The answer lies in the powerful allure of the ancient astronaut theory, popularized by authors like Erich von Däniken. The story of the Dropa stones is a perfect, self-contained package for this genre, an archaeological discovery, mysterious non-human skeletons, and a direct written account of an extraterrestrial visit. It was spread through sensationalist books and magazines, each retelling adding new layers of detail and authority without any actual proof. The story also emerged during the Cold War, a time when China was largely closed off to the West, making it impossible for foreign researchers to verify or debunk the claims on the ground. This isolation provided the perfect breeding ground for a mystery that could not be easily solved. But there might be a kernel of real archaeology at the very heart of this tall tale. The region where the discs were allegedly found is real and is home to a people known as the Dropka, a Tibetan word for nomadic herders. Furthermore, by discs, which are flat jade stones with a center hole, are well-known artifacts from Neolithic China, though they lack any form of writing. It is possible that a discovery of unusual skeletons, perhaps a group of people with a genetic condition causing dwarfism or macrocephaly, and a cache of these common-buy discs was conflated and sensationalized by a journalist or an overzealous researcher, then spun into an interstellar saga. The Dropa stones ultimately serve as a fascinating case study not in ancient aliens but in the creation of modern mythology. They show how a compelling narrative, once released into the world, can take on a life of its own, completely detached from facts, thriving in the fertile ground between what we know and what we desperately wish to believe. While the search for lost cities and ancient temples often takes us to remote deserts or deep beneath the ocean, our next mystery unfolds in the rolling, green landscape of a quiet European river valley, a place where an amateur archaeologist's bold claim has ignited one of the most heated and controversial debates in modern archaeology. Just northwest of Sarajevo, in the town of Visoko, Bosnia, a series of large, symmetrically shaped hills have captivated the world. To the casual observer, they simply look like steep, forested slopes. But to Semir Osmanagic, a Bosnian-American businessman with a passion for alternative history, they presented a radically different possibility. In 2005, he announced to the world that these were not hills at all, but the remains of the largest and oldest pyramids ever built by humankind, a complex he christened the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, along with structures he named the Pyramid of the Moon, the Pyramid of the Dragon, and the Pyramid of Love. Osmanagic's claims are nothing short of revolutionary. He asserts that the Pyramid of the Sun is over 220 meters high, which would make it a third taller than the Great Pyramid of Giza, and that it was constructed by an unknown, highly advanced civilization over 12,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age. His team's excavations have reportedly uncovered massive, man-made concrete blocks covering the structures, extensive underground tunnel networks, and mysterious energy beams emanating from the peaks. For his supporters, this is the most important archaeological discovery in history, proof of a lost global culture that possessed knowledge far beyond what we've ascribed to ancient peoples. It's a narrative that has captured the public imagination, drawing thousands of tourists and volunteer diggers to Visoko each year, all hoping to be part of a paradigm-shifting moment. The reaction from the mainstream archaeological community, however, has been one of nearly universal and vehement dismissal. Leading experts from across Europe and the world have examined the site and the evidence, and they arrive at a much more prosaic conclusion. Geologists point out that the hills are a perfectly natural geological formation known as a flatiron, a common shape created by the erosion of sedimentary layers over millions of years. The concrete blocks discovered by Osmanagic's team are, according to geologists, nothing more than natural conglomerate breccia, a type of sedimentary rock where fragments of rock are naturally cemented together by a finer matrix. The angles and flat planes of the hills are the result of fracturing and erosion along natural bedding planes in the rock, not the work of ancient engineers. The controversy goes far beyond a simple academic disagreement over rocks. It strikes at the very heart of archaeological methodology. Professional archaeologists argue that Osmanagic's excavations are conducted without scientific rigor. They claim that his team digs without proper stratigraphic control, ignores the context of any artifacts found, and often misidentifies natural features as man-made. For instance, the much-touted underground tunnels, known as Ravni tunnels, are seen by geologists as natural karstic features or old mining passages from the medieval period, not sacred pathways built by pyramid builders. The European Association of Archaeologists issued a formal statement condemning the project, calling it a cruel hoax that is not only bad science but also potentially damaging to the genuine archaeological heritage of the region, which includes important Neolithic and Roman sites. What makes the Bosnian pyramid phenomenon so fascinating is that it exists in a frustrating gray area between clear-cut fact and fiction. While the central claim of a 12,000-year-old pyramid is almost certainly false, the excavations have unearthed some genuinely puzzling artifacts that keep the mystery alive. Workers have pulled strange, carved stones from the tunnels that appear to have symbolic markings. They've found pieces of organic material deep within the structures that have been carbon dated to surprisingly ancient times, though critics argue this merely dates material that washed into natural fissures long after the hill was formed. These ambiguous finds are just compelling enough to provide fuel for the believers, who see them as validation, while remaining easily dismissed by skeptics as either misidentified or contaminated evidence. The story of the Bosnian pyramids is ultimately a powerful case study in how we choose to see the past. It highlights the tension between established academic institutions and enthusiastic amateurs, between the slow, painstaking process of peer-reviewed science and the allure of a spectacular, history-altering discovery. It shows how easily national pride and the economic boost of tourism can become intertwined with archaeological interpretation. For the people of Bosnia, still healing from a devastating war, the Pyramid Project has become a source of hope and international attention, a symbol of a proud and ancient identity. Whether the hills of Visoko are truly the work of an unknown civilization or simply a beautiful trick of geology, they have succeeded in doing what all great mysteries do. They have made us look closer, question what we think we know, and wonder if the truth might be stranger than we ever imagined. Yet for all the grand tales of vanished armies and sunken cities, sometimes the most haunting mysteries are those that feel almost within our grasp, stories from a not-so-distant past where the details are crisp, but the truth remains just out of reach. This brings us to a chilling tale from the Age of Sail, a puzzle that has become the very archetype of maritime mystery, the baffling case of the Mary Celeste. In December 1872, the British merchant ship De Gracia was sailing through a calm Atlantic, about 400 miles off the coast of the Azores, when her crew spotted another vessel listing gently in the swell. As they drew closer, they recognized her as the Mary Celeste, a two-masted brigantine that had left New York for Genoa a month prior, but something was clearly wrong. Her sails were partially set, some torn and hanging limply, and she was steering erratically like a ghost ship dancing on the waves. After hailing her and receiving no response, the captain of the De Gracia sent a boarding party across. What they discovered aboard the Mary Celeste would ignite a mystery that has burned for over a century and a half. The scene that greeted the boarding party was one of profound and eerie tranquility. The ship was seaworthy, floating comfortably with her hull sound and her cargo, over 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol largely intact. There was no sign of a struggle, no evidence of violence or piracy. In fact, much of the ship was in good order, yet the entire crew was gone. Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife, their 2-year-old daughter, and the 7 experienced seamen had vanished without a trace. The lifeboat was missing, suggesting a deliberate launch, but almost everything else seemed strangely normal. A chart was found on the captain's desk, as if he had been mid-calculation. The crew's personal belongings and valuables were still in their quarters. There was even a meal set out, uneaten, on the galley table. The only real clues were a few feet of water in the bilge, not an unusual amount for a ship of that era, and the fact that the forward hatch cover had been removed, though the cargo hold showed no significant damage. The ship's sole navigational chronometer and seaworthy sextant were missing, but another broken sextant was left behind. It was as if the crew had simply decided, in a moment of collective and panicked haste, to abandon a perfectly sound vessel for reasons we can only guess at. This bizarre set of circumstances has spawned a flotilla of theories, each attempting to solve the riddle of why a seasoned captain would make such a fatal decision. One of the most persistent explanations involves the ship's volatile cargo. The theory suggests that fumes from the alcohol leaking from a few barrels may have built up in the hold. Captain Briggs, fearing an imminent and catastrophic explosion, might have ordered the hatches open to air out the hold and made the desperate decision to evacuate everyone into the lifeboat as a temporary safety measure, keeping it tethered to the ship. A sudden gust of wind could have then snapped the tow line, leaving the lifeboat adrift and at the mercy of the open ocean while the Mary Celeste, now aired out, sailed on unharmed. This would explain the lack of panic or signs of disaster aboard. However, the alcohol was not pure ethanol but a less volatile denatured product, and subsequent investigators found no evidence of a leak significant enough to cause such alarm. The ship's pump was found disassembled, perhaps indicating they were trying to deal with the water in the bilge, but even that seems an insufficient reason for abandonment. Other theories dive into the realm of the natural and the supernatural. Some have proposed a sudden waterspout or a minor seaquake that may have shaken the ship violently, causing the crew to believe she was breaking apart and leading them to flee. Perhaps they were the victims of a giant squid attack, a notion popularized by fiction, but with no basis in the evidence found on deck. The more sensational theories have included claims of piracy or mutiny, but these are thoroughly undermined by the complete absence of any violence and the fact that the crew's valuables were left untouched. Even the possibility of foul play from the crew of the Dei Gratia was investigated by a British Vice Admiralty court in Gibraltar, but they were ultimately awarded prize money for salvaging the vessel, a ruling that would be unlikely if they were suspected of causing the disappearance. The true power of the Mary Celeste story lies in its painful humanity. We have names, faces, and histories for the people who vanished. Captain Briggs was a devout and capable family man. His diary entries speak of a smooth voyage right up until the end. The thought of him, his young wife, and their toddler being cast adrift in a small boat on the vast, indifferent Atlantic is a profoundly tragic image. Their fate was almost certainly a slow and grim one: exposure, thirst, and the sea. The mystery endures not because the answer is unknowable, but because the available evidence points in multiple, equally plausible directions. It is a perfect historical Rorschach test, inviting us to project our own fears onto the blank canvas of the unknown. The Mary Celeste symbolizes the ultimate maritime nightmare, not a dramatic shipwreck or a battle with a monster, but a simple, inexplicable error in judgment made under pressure, a single bad decision that led to an entire crew vanishing into the void. It stands as a permanent reminder that the ocean keeps its secrets well, and that sometimes the most frightening question is not what happened, but why. While Ötzi the Iceman rightly captures the world's imagination with his incredible 5,000-year-old story, his discovery also opened a window onto a much broader and more mysterious phenomenon. The High Alps, it turns out, hold other secrets, other frozen figures from the deep past whose stories are just as compelling and enigmatic. These are the Copper Age mummies, preserved not by human artifice but by the perfect, icy embrace of the mountains. Each one is a time capsule, a singular individual whose final moments were abruptly halted and then held in suspended animation for millennia, waiting to speak to us across the ages. The discovery of Ötzi in 1991 was a moment of sheer, unprecedented luck, a convergence of melting ice and curious hikers, but it signaled to archaeologists and glaciologists that he might not be alone. As climate change accelerates the retreat of the alpine glaciers, more of these ancient travelers are emerging from the ice. While none are as complete as Ötzi, their fragmented remains and the artifacts found with them are no less significant. They confirm that journeying through these treacherous high-altitude passes was not a one-time anomaly but a more common practice during the Copper Age. This realization forces a profound shift in how we view these ancient people. They were not simply confined to their valleys. They were bold explorers of the skyward world, traversing landscapes that even today demand respect and careful preparation. The question then becomes not just who these individuals were, but what compelled them to risk everything in such a hostile and unforgiving environment. The items these individuals carried with them offer our most tangible connection to their lives and their final journeys. Ötzi's gear was a masterpiece of Neolithic technology, a finely crafted copper axe that spoke of high status, a sophisticated bow and a quiver of arrows, a fire-starting kit, and a rudimentary medical kit of fungi with antibacterial properties. This was the toolkit of a man prepared for anything, or so it seemed. The nature of his equipment suggests he was more than a simple shepherd. He may have been a trader, a guide, or even a chieftain on a significant mission. Other ice mummies have been found with different yet equally telling assemblages. Some discoveries include simple bronze pins, fragments of woolen clothing, or containers that might have held food. The variation in their possessions hints at a diversity of purpose, from high-status individuals on political or spiritual journeys to more common folk moving between settlements. Each object is a clue, but together they paint a picture of a dynamic, interconnected mountain world that we are only beginning to comprehend. Yet, for all the insights their lives provide, it is their deaths that present the most enduring and haunting mysteries. Ötzi's own end was shockingly violent. Modern CT scans revealed an arrowhead lodged deep in his left shoulder, which would have severed a major artery and caused a slow, painful death. He also had a deep cut on his hand from a fight just days before, and his body showed evidence of a blow to the head. This was not a man who died in a simple hiking accident. He was pursued, engaged in combat, and ultimately murdered. This grim evidence transforms his story from a tale of survival against the elements into a prehistoric thriller, a personal drama of conflict and flight. Why was he killed? Was it a territorial dispute, a robbery, or a ritual sacrifice? The fact that his valuable copper axe was left with him seems to rule out theft, deepening the mystery of his murderer's motive. The deaths of other ice mummies are often more enigmatic, their causes lost to time, leaving us to wonder if they too fell victim to violence, exposure, or a simple misstep on a treacherous glacier. This leads to the most profound and unsettling questions surrounding these finds. Were these journeys purely practical, or did they hold a deeper, more spiritual significance? The remote, otherworldly nature of the High Alps, places often described as being between heaven and earth, has led some researchers to propose a more ritualistic interpretation. Could these passages have been part of a rite of passage, a vision quest, or even a form of ritual sacrifice? In many ancient cultures, mountains were considered the abodes of gods, and journeys to their summits were fraught with spiritual danger. The fact that some bodies, like Ötzi, were not formally buried but simply left where they fell could suggest a cultural practice where those who died on such sacred ground were left as offerings to the divine. Alternatively, their presence could be explained by more pragmatic reasons. Perhaps they were simply taking a well-known, if dangerous, shortcut between seasonal camps or trade routes, a calculated risk that for them ended in disaster. The true power of these alpine mummies lies in their humanity. They are not abstract concepts or dusty artifacts in a museum case. They are people. We can look at the wear on Ötzi's knees and speculate about a life of hard travel over mountainous terrain. We can see the tattoos on his skin, which may have been an early form of pain-relieving acupuncture. We can even analyze the contents of his stomach and know his last meal was red deer and ibex meat, along with some ancient grain. This incredible intimacy makes their unexplained deaths all the more poignant. They were someone's father, son, or leader. They had plans, fears, and hopes that were extinguished in a moment of crisis high above the tree line. Their preserved bodies are a direct physical link to a world that is otherwise invisible to us, a silent testament to the bravery, the ingenuity, and the peril that defined life in the ancient Alps. They remind us that the past is not a single story, but a multitude of individual lives, each with its own unique and often mysterious end. While the Nazca Lines have captivated the world's imagination for decades, they are not the only, or even the most extensive network of ancient geoglyphs in South America. Far to the southeast, in the high-altitude plains of western Bolivia, lies a vast and even more sprawling enigma, the Nazca Lines, covering a staggering 22,000 square kilometers. This incredible web of paths is etched into the dry, grassy surface of the Altiplano, radiating out from the sacred Nevado Sajoma volcano. Imagine an area nearly the size of the state of New Jersey, every inch of it crisscrossed with straight, purposeful lines. There are thousands of them, perhaps tens of thousands, creating a dense, labyrinthine map that can only be truly appreciated from the air. Their sheer scale is almost incomprehensible, representing a communal project of such ambition and duration that it rivals the construction of the Great Pyramids, yet it remains one of the least understood archaeological phenomena on the planet. The lines themselves are deceptively simple in construction. They were created by the painstaking process of clearing away the dark, oxidized surface stones and gravel to reveal the lighter, sandy-colored soil beneath. This method, similar to that used in Nazca, creates a stark visual contrast that has allowed these pathways to endure for centuries, perhaps even millennia. But unlike the Nazca figures, which are primarily representational, the Sajoma lines are almost entirely geometric. They form a mesmerizing network of straight lines, perfect triangles, and quadrangles that stretch for extraordinary distances. Some individual lines run perfectly straight for over 20 kilometers, traversing hills and valleys without the slightest deviation. This unwavering precision across such rugged terrain suggests the builders possessed not only a sophisticated understanding of surveying but also a powerful, shared purpose that drove this generation's long endeavor. So who built this colossal cartographic puzzle? The most likely creators are the Aymara people, whose ancestors have inhabited this harsh, beautiful landscape for thousands of years. The lines center around the Nevado Sajoma, the tallest mountain in Bolivia, which has always held profound spiritual significance as an Apu, or mountain deity, in Andean cosmology. This sacred context is crucial to understanding the line's potential purpose. One of the leading theories is that they were spiritual pathways or sects used for ceremonial processions and pilgrimages. In this view, the entire network was a vast ritual landscape, with different lines leading from outlying villages directly to the base of the holy mountain or to other sacred sites like shrines and burial towers called cholpas. Walking these straight paths would have been a physical and spiritual journey, a way to connect with the ancestors and the powerful forces of the natural world. An alternative, though not mutually exclusive, theory posits a more pragmatic astronomical function. The high, clear air of the Bolivian Altiplano provides an unparalleled view of the night sky, and many of the longer lines align with the rising and setting points of the sun, moon, and important stars during solstices and equinoxes. They could have served as a gigantic celestial calendar, helping to regulate the agricultural cycle and mark important ceremonial dates in a region where survival hinges on understanding the seasons. Other researchers have proposed they functioned as defensive boundaries, territorial markers for different Aymara clans, or even as guides for llama caravans traversing the expansive trade routes of the Andes. The true answer is likely a complex fusion of all these ideas. The lines were probably multifunctional, serving as roads for both people and gods, blending the practical needs of navigation and calendrics with the deep spiritual beliefs of their creators. What makes the Sajoma lines so profoundly mysterious, and why have they remained so obscure compared to their Peruvian cousins? The primary reason is their remote and challenging location. Situated at an altitude of over 12,000 feet, the area is difficult to access and even harder to study extensively. The lines are so vast and densely packed that they defy conventional archaeological survey methods. To map them properly requires satellite imagery and high-altitude aerial photography, technologies that have only recently become widely available. Furthermore, unlike the Nazca Desert, the Altiplano is not a sterile preserve. Grass grows here, and the hooves of grazing livestock, modern road construction, and erosion gradually obscure the ancient paths, making their study a race against time. This immense, silent web etched into the earth is a testament to a forgotten chapter of human organization and belief. It speaks of a society capable of incredible long-term planning and communal effort, a people who sought to impose a beautiful, sacred order upon their world by literally drawing their cosmology into the very land they inhabited. The Nazca Lines challenge us because they offer no grand statues or golden treasures. Their value is not in precious artifacts, but in the breathtaking scale of the idea itself. They represent a different kind of monument, one not built upward toward the heavens, but drawn outward across the earth, a permanent reminder that the greatest mysteries are often not hidden in tombs, but lying in plain sight, waiting for us to finally see the pattern in the landscape. Isolated in the Atlantic Ocean, far from the coasts of Africa, the Canary Islands hold the enigmatic legacy of a people who should not, by any conventional historical model, exist. Here, the Guanche culture flourished in complete isolation for over 1,000 years, developing a society so unique and practices so strangely familiar that they have become one of archaeology's most captivating puzzles. And nothing embodies this mystery more profoundly than their mummies. The Guanche mummification process was a sophisticated and ritualized practice that bears an uncanny and deeply puzzling resemblance to the techniques perfected in ancient Egypt. The body was eviscerated, the internal organs removed and treated separately. The cavity was then cleaned and filled with a combination of sand, aromatic plants, and resins from the local pine forest. The skin was meticulously treated with a mixture of goat butter, powdered pumice stone, and other minerals before the body was carefully wrapped in sewn goat or sheepskin shrouds and laid to rest in caves, often within the island's vast, labyrinthine volcanic tube systems. The result was a mummy of such high quality that it could easily be mistaken for one from the Nile Valley, raising the immediate and haunting question: how did two cultures, separated by a vast and unforgiving ocean, develop such strikingly similar and complex mortuary sciences entirely independently? This question of connection lies at the heart of the Guanche mystery. Who were these people and where did they come from? Linguistically and genetically, the evidence points strongly to a North African Berber origin. The few surviving words of their language, along with genetic studies of the mummies themselves, show clear links to Amazigh tribes from the nearby continent. The most plausible theory suggests they were brought to the islands by the Romans or the Phoenicians, perhaps as slaves or exiles, and then left utterly alone for centuries, their boats forgotten or destroyed, cutting them off from any further contact with the outside world. In this isolation, their culture evolved along its own unique path. They developed no seafaring technology despite being islanders and had no knowledge of metalworking, crafting their tools from obsidian and bone. They lived in caves and simple stone structures, yet they built a complex society with a clear hierarchy, led by kings known as menses, and a rich spiritual life centered around a supreme god, Achamon, and a host of lesser spirits. The Spanish conquest of the Canary Islands in the 15th century was a cataclysm from which Guanche culture never recovered. It was a brutal campaign of subjugation, and within a few generations, their language, religion, and social structures were systematically erased, assimilated, or wiped out by introduced diseases. This violent severing of their history is what makes the mummies so critically important. They are not just bodies, they are the last silent sentinels of a world that was deliberately destroyed. They hold the only remaining biological and cultural clues to a people whose story was almost entirely lost. Every thread of woven shroud, every trace of resinous preservative, every genetic marker locked within their bones is a piece of a puzzle we are still desperately trying to reassemble. They are a poignant reminder that history is often written by the victors, but the truth endures in the most unexpected places, waiting in silent, darkened caves for us to finally listen. And so we reach the end of our journey, a voyage that has taken us across continents and through millennia to stand before 30 of history's greatest unsolved riddles. From the impossible engineering of the Great Pyramid to the silent, stoic gaze of the Moai, From the coded secrets of the Voynich Manuscript to the sunken halls of Helike, we've ventured into the shadows of the past, guided only by our curiosity. Each of these mysteries, in its own way, is a testament to the boundless ingenuity, the spiritual depth, and the sheer stubborn will of our ancestors. They achieved wonders with simple tools and left behind monuments that continue to hum with questions we still can't quite answer. These enigmas do more than just baffle us, they redefine the very story of humanity. They force us to tear out old textbook pages and reconsider timelines we thought were set in stone. They remind us that history is not a simple, linear narrative of progress, but a complex, often fragmented tapestry where brilliance can flare up and then vanish, where entire chapters can be lost to the sea, the sand, or simply the passage of time. The true value of these puzzles isn't necessarily in solving them, but in the act of searching itself. They keep the past alive and dynamic, a conversation between generations of explorers, scholars, and dreamers. They are a permanent invitation to wonder, to question, and to look at a simple stone or a faded piece of parchment and see not just an object but a story waiting to be told. Now we turn the conversation over to you. After this deep dive into the unknown, which of these ancient secrets captured your imagination the most? Was it the chilling story of the Mary Celeste, a mystery playing out on the open ocean just a few centuries ago? Or does your mind keep drifting back to the impossible age of Göbekli Tepe, a structure that fundamentally challenges our understanding of human development? Perhaps you're drawn to the personal tragedy of Ötzi the Iceman, a murder mystery frozen for 5,000 years. Let us know in the comments below which mystery you find the most compelling and why. If you enjoyed this expedition into the depths of history, be sure to show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more investigations into the world's greatest unsolved puzzles. Don't forget to hit that bell icon so you won't miss our next adventure. Thank you for